Have you ever wondered what quiet mysteries drift beneath the surface of the Pokémon world? Theories that reshape everything you thought you knew about this universe. Tonight, we're wandering through the most compelling theories ever imagined, ideas that linger softly in the background of every game, every episode, every quiet moment in the tall grass. From the very first episode to the deepest corners of regional folklore, these theories ask gentle questions about what's really happening in this world. Before you settle in, maybe tap subscribe for more calm stories, and share where in the world you're watching from tonight. And the best place to start is where a young trainer first looked up into the rainy sky and saw something impossible, where a legendary bird appeared for just a moment, carrying with it implications that fans have been quietly contemplating for decades. The morning Ash Ketchum left Pallet Town, he was already late, already stumbling, already behind every other new trainer who had started their journey on time that day. His first Pokémon wasn't chosen. It was assigned out of necessity, a Pikachu with an attitude problem and no interest in bonding with a human trainer. Everything about that beginning felt chaotic and unplanned, as if the universe itself hadn't quite decided whether this boy would amount to anything at all. But then something remarkable happened at the end of that very first day, something that would quietly define every moment of Ash's journey from that point forward, even if he never fully understood its significance. After being chased by a flock of Spearow through a thunderstorm, after Pikachu finally defended him with everything it had, Ash and his partner lay exhausted on the forest floor, drenched and defeated. The rain began to soften around them, and through the parting clouds, a shape emerged, golden and radiant against the gray sky. It was Ho-Oh, a legendary Pokémon that most trainers would never see in their entire lives, soaring overhead with wings that seemed to carry the light of the sun itself. The moment lasted only seconds, but those seconds have echoed through the entire series, raising questions that have never been fully answered. In the Johto region, centuries before Ash was born, Ho-Oh was known as a guardian of harmony between humans and Pokémon, a creature so rare and so sacred that entire cultures built their beliefs around the possibility of one day seeing it. According to ancient legends, preserved in the Ekritique city archives, Ho-Oh would only reveal itself to trainers who possessed a pure heart, those who truly understood what it meant to respect and care for Pokémon as equals rather than tools. The legendary bird was said to bring eternal happiness to anyone fortunate enough to witness its flight, a blessing that would follow them through their entire life, protecting them from darkness and guiding them toward their true destiny. For over 300 years, Ho-Oh hid itself away in the Tin Tower, waiting patiently for the world to change, for humanity to evolve beyond its old destructive patterns. The Pokémon watched silently as generations passed, as wars were fought and peace was made, as technology advanced and cultures shifted. It was searching for a sign that the time had finally come, that humans and Pokémon could truly coexist in the way the ancient prophecies had described. And on that rainy afternoon, when a 10-year-old boy sacrificed his own safety to protect a Pikachu he barely knew, perhaps Ho-Oh saw exactly what it had been waiting for all those centuries. Some theorists believe that Ho-Oh's appearance was more than just a rare sighting, that it was actually a deliberate blessing bestowed upon Ash Ketchum at the very beginning of his journey. The timing feels too perfect to be coincidental, appearing at the exact moment when Ash proved his worthiness, when he demonstrated that he valued his Pokémon's life above his own. This theory suggests that Ho-Oh granted Ash eternal happiness, fulfilling the ancient promise described in Johto folklore, protecting him throughout his adventures, and ensuring that his journey would be filled with meaningful experiences and deep connections. Before you drift off, maybe tap subscribe for more gentle videos and let me know where you're listening from tonight. But the theory goes deeper than simple protection and happiness, extending into territory that feels almost unsettling when you really consider its implications. If Ho-Oh truly granted Ash eternal happiness, what form would that happiness take for a 10-year-old boy whose greatest dream was to become a Pokémon master? Perhaps it would mean endless adventure, boundless energy, and the perpetual excitement of youth. Perhaps it would mean never having to face the inevitable disappointments and compromises that come with growing older, never having to watch childhood dreams fade into adult responsibilities. Perhaps it would mean staying exactly as he was on that day, frozen in time at the perfect age for beginning a journey, forever 10 years old. This aspect of the theory has captured the imagination of fans for years, offering a gentle explanation for one of the series' most discussed mysteries. Ash never ages throughout his adventures, traveling through region after region, experiencing years' worth of events, yet somehow remaining perpetually young. His companions grow and change, his Pokémon evolve and mature, but Ash himself exists in a kind of temporal bubble, untouched by the passage of time that affects everyone around him. Some viewers find this comforting, a reminder that some dreams can last forever if we hold them close enough. Others see it as bittersweet, a blessing that might also be a cage, keeping Ash in a state of eternal childhood while the world moves forward without him. The evidence supporting this theory extends beyond just Ash's age, reaching into the very structure of how his journey unfolds across the different regions. Each new adventure begins with renewed enthusiasm, as if the previous region's experiences have settled into distant memory rather than recent history. Ash arrives in each new place with the same wide-eyed wonder he had in Pallet Town, making similar mistakes, learning similar lessons, approaching each gym battle and tournament with the same mixture of determination and naivety. It's as if time doesn't accumulate for him the way it does for everyone else, as if each region exists in its own bubble, where growth happens differently, more cyclically than linearly. In the quiet moments between major events, you can almost feel the weight of this eternal blessing, the way it shapes everything Ash experiences without him ever quite realizing what's happening. He forms deep friendships with his traveling companions, bonds that feel genuine and meaningful, yet when the time comes to part ways, he always moves on with surprising ease. New companions arrive, old ones fade into the background, and Ash continues forward with the same openness to connection that he had at the beginning. It's beautiful in its own way, this endless capacity for new relationships, but it also suggests a kind of temporal recursion, a pattern that repeats because time itself has lost its usual meaning in his life. The theory proposes that Ho-Oh's blessing wasn't just about physical age or happiness, but about preserving something more fundamental about who Ash was in that moment on the ground, looking up at the legendary bird. It preserved his capacity for wonder, his ability to see each new Pokémon as a miracle, his genuine belief that friendship and determination could overcome any obstacle. These qualities, so natural in a child, often erode as people age and encounter disappointment, failure, and the complex moral ambiguities of adult life. But for Ash, they remain pristine, untouched, as fresh on his 1000th adventure as they were on his first, and perhaps that's the real gift Ho-Oh bestowed upon him that rainy afternoon. As we drift a little deeper into these theories tonight, it's worth considering how this blessing might connect to other mysteries in the Pokémon world, how it might be just one thread in a much larger tapestry of unexplained phenomena. The Pokémon universe is full of temporal anomalies and legendary beings with the power to manipulate time itself, from Celebi's ability to travel through history to Dialga's control over the very fabric of temporal existence. In this context, a legendary bird granting eternal youth to one special trainer doesn't seem quite so impossible. It feels almost natural, like one more way the mysterious forces of this world manifest themselves in the lives of those they touch. The episode where this theory finds its deepest confirmation comes much later in the series, during Ash's journey through the Johto region, when he finally learns the full extent of Ho-Oh's significance. The revelations come slowly, carefully, through conversations with wise elders and ancient texts preserved in forgotten temples. He discovers that Ho-Oh doesn't just bring happiness, it specifically brings eternal happiness, a detail that takes on new meaning when considered alongside his unchanging age. The word eternal appears again and again in the old stories, sometimes referring to the duration of the blessing, sometimes to its depth, but always carrying the weight of something that exists outside normal time, something that lasts forever without fading or diminishing. There's a quiet poetry to the idea that Ash's greatest blessing might also be his greatest limitation, that the same gift that allows him to experience endless adventure also prevents him from experiencing the full arc of a human life. He'll never know what it's like to grow old, to look back on his childhood with the perspective of decades, to see how his dreams evolved and transformed as he matured. Instead, he exists in a perpetual present, each moment as vivid and immediate as the last, unburdened by nostalgia, because the past never really becomes the past for him. It's a strange kind of immortality, one that preserves the self rather than just the body, keeping not just his physical form young, but his entire way of experiencing the world. Fans who subscribe to this theory often point to specific moments throughout the series that seem to acknowledge this temporal strangeness, episodes where other characters comment on Ash's age, or where time seems to pass differently for him than for those around him. These moments are subtle, easy to miss if you're not looking for them, but they accumulate over hundreds of episodes into a pattern that's hard to ignore. It's as if the writers themselves are leaving breadcrumbs, gentle hints that something unusual is happening with time and Ash's story, that the eternal happiness promised by Ho-Oh is manifesting in ways both wonderful and melancholic. Slowly, the story widens to encompass other characters whose existence has puzzled fans for years, figures who appear again and again throughout Ash's journey in ways that strain credibility if taken at face value. These are the Nurse Joys and Officer Jennies, women whose identical appearances across every city, every town, every Pokémon Center and police station raise questions that the official explanations have never quite satisfactorily answered. According to the established canon, they're all cousins, members of massive extended families who just happen to look remarkably similar and who all chose the same career paths as their relatives. It's possible, certainly, but it's also the kind of explanation that invites deeper investigation, the kind of official story that feels like it might be covering up something stranger and more unsettling. The theory that Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny are clones emerged shortly after the first Pokémon movie introduced the concept of cloning to the series, opening up new possibilities for explaining the unexplainable. In that film, the villain Mewtwo creates perfect genetic copies of Pokémon, demonstrating that the technology exists in this world to duplicate living beings down to their last cell. The movie treats cloning as a serious moral question, exploring themes of identity, originality, and what it means to be real versus what it means to be a copy. It's a dark storyline for a children's franchise, touching on existential questions that linger long after the credits roll, and it casts everything that comes after it in a slightly different light. If cloning technology exists and can create perfect duplicates of Pokémon, the theory asks, why couldn't it also create perfect duplicates of humans? The leap isn't as dramatic as it might initially seem, especially when you consider the suspicious uniformity of the Joys and Jennies. They don't just look similar, they look identical, with the same facial features, the same body types, the same mannerisms and speech patterns. Even their partner Pokémon are the same. Every Nurse Joy has a Chansey or Blissey, every Officer Jenny has a Growlithe or Arcanine. This level of consistency across an entire profession, spread across multiple regions, suggests something more deliberate than simple family tradition or career heredity. The theory proposes that these women might be clones created for specific purposes, designed to fill essential roles in Pokémon society with absolute reliability and consistency. A Nurse Joy in every Pokémon Center means trainers always know exactly what to expect. The same compassionate care, the same medical expertise, the same reassuring presence, no matter where they travel. An Officer Jenny in every town ensures consistent law enforcement, the same dedication to justice, the same protective instinct toward both people and Pokémon. From a societal perspective, it's almost elegant in its efficiency, assuming you can look past the profound ethical implications of creating human beings specifically to fulfill predetermined roles. The creators of these clones, if they exist, remain a matter of speculation within the theory, though many fans point to Team Rocket as the most likely culprit. The organization has demonstrated both the technological capability and the moral flexibility to attempt something like mass human cloning. Their scientist, Dr. Fuji, was the one who created Mewtwo, who pushed the boundaries of genetic engineering further than perhaps anyone else in the Pokémon world. His tragic backstory, his desperate attempt to clone his deceased daughter Amber, shows both his technical expertise and his willingness to cross ethical lines in pursuit of his goals. If Fuji could attempt to resurrect a dead child through cloning, creating standardized medical and law enforcement personnel would be comparatively simple. The failed attempt to clone Amber appears in extended versions of the first movie, a heartbreaking subplot that adds layers of complexity to Fuji's character and to the nature of cloning in the Pokémon universe. The cloned Amber existed for a brief time, interacting with the young Mewtwo before fading away, her consciousness unable to sustain itself outside her original body. It's one of the most emotionally devastating moments in the entire franchise, a reminder that even when cloning succeeds technically, it can fail in ways that are far more profound and painful. This history makes the idea of successful, stable human clones even more intriguing, suggesting that Fuji or his successors eventually solved the problems that made Amber's clone unsustainable. There's also the possibility, quietly suggested by some fans, that Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny aren't human clones at all, but rather Pokémon who have been genetically modified to take human form. This variation of the theory is more speculative, less grounded in evidence, but it carries a certain unsettling logic. We know that Pokémon can take human form. We've seen it with Latias, with Zorua, with various ghost types who disguise themselves as people. We also know that Pokémon can be altered through human technology. We've seen it with Mewtwo, with type Null, with the various experimental creatures that appear throughout the series. The combination of these two concepts, transformation and modification, could theoretically produce beings that appear perfectly human while possessing abilities and characteristics more commonly associated with Pokémon. This would explain why every Nurse Joy seems to have the same infinite patience and energy, why they can work extraordinarily long hours without apparent fatigue, why they possess an almost supernatural ability to understand and heal Pokémon. These aren't just professional skills honed through training, the theory suggests. They might be inherent abilities, the natural gifts of a Pokemon species specifically designed or evolved to fulfill this healing role. The same could be true for Officer Jenny, whose reflexes, strength, and tracking abilities sometimes seem to exceed normal human capabilities, suggesting something more than just excellent police training at work. The partner Pokemon that always accompany these women take on new significance under this interpretation, perhaps serving less as companions and more as anchors, reminders of what they truly are beneath the human disguise. A Chansey by Nurse Joy's side might be a sister rather than a pet, a member of the same species before transformation. A Growlithe following Officer Jenny could be a similar connection, a link to her true nature that she carries with her always. It's a deeply strange idea, one that transforms these familiar, comforting figures into something much more mysterious and possibly tragic. Beings who exist between categories, neither fully human nor fully Pokemon, serving roles assigned to them by creators whose motives remain obscure. Before we continue this gentle journey deeper into the theories that reshape the Pokemon world, it's worth sitting for a moment with the implications of what these ideas suggest about the society we've been watching all these years. If human cloning exists on a wide scale, if Pokemon can be transformed into people, if temporal blessings freeze children in eternal youth, then the Pokemon world is far stranger and more ethically complex than its cheerful surface suggests. Beneath the bright colors and friendly battles, beneath the encouraging messages about friendship and determination, there might be layers of reality that the main characters never fully perceive. Mysteries that exist just outside their awareness, shaping their world in ways they can't quite see. There's a quiet comfort in remembering moments like these, in turning over familiar elements of the Pokemon world and discovering they might mean something entirely different than we first assumed. It's part of what makes these theories so compelling. They don't destroy the original experience. They add depth to it, suggesting that there was always more happening than we realized, more complexity hidden in plain sight. Whether the Nurse Joys are clones or not, whether Officer Jenny is human or something else entirely, the fact that the question can be asked, that the evidence exists to support these theories, tells us something important about the world Game Freak and the anime creators built. It's deep enough to contain secrets, rich enough to reward this kind of careful attention. Another theory that emerges from the early episodes, one that transforms a simple Pokemon design into something far more ominous, involves Voltorb and its evolution electrode. These sphere-shaped Pokemon have always been somewhat mysterious, first appearing in the Kanto region as surprisingly dangerous creatures that could be found disguised as Pokeballs in various locations. Trainers exploring caves or abandoned buildings would reach for what they thought was a useful item, only to find themselves in battle with an explosive creature. A nasty surprise that taught many players to approach suspicious Pokeballs with more caution. But the similarity between Voltorb and Pokeballs goes beyond simple mimicry. According to some theorists, it might actually explain what Voltorb fundamentally is. The theory proposes that Voltorb isn't a naturally occurring Pokemon at all, but rather the result of a haunter attempting to possess a Pokeball and becoming permanently trapped inside. This would explain several oddities about Voltorb's design and behavior, starting with its appearance. Unlike a normal Pokeball, Voltorb has no button on its front, as if the mechanism that usually controls the device has been damaged or destroyed from within. Its eyes are strikingly similar to those of Haunter, both featuring the same slightly sinister expression and similar shape. And most tellingly, Voltorb's tendency to explode when threatened matches exactly what you might expect from a ghost-type Pokemon desperately trying to escape from confinement. In Generation 1, the only ghost-type Pokémon available were Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar, a single evolutionary line representing the entire type. Ghost Pokémon in the early games were presented as genuinely unsettling, more closely aligned with actual supernatural entities than the friendly creatures that dominate most of the Pokédex. Haunter, in particular, was shown to have the ability to pass through solid objects and possess living beings, demonstrated in the anime when one Haunter terrorizes the main characters through a series of disturbing pranks. The idea that a Haunter might try to possess an inanimate object like a Pokeball isn't far-fetched. It's actually consistent with what we know about ghost-type abilities and behaviors. The moment of possession, according to the theory, would have gone catastrophically wrong. A Pokeball is designed to contain Pokémon, to compress them into energy and store them safely until released. When a ghost type that exists partially outside physical reality attempts to possess such a device, the resulting conflict between the ball's containment protocols and the ghost's ethereal nature would create an unstable situation. Unable to fully possess the ball, but also unable to escape it, the Haunter would become trapped, its consciousness merged with the device in a way that transformed both into something new, something that was neither Haunter nor Pokeball, but a strange fusion of the two. This fusion would explain Voltorb's typing as pure electric rather than ghost. The energy systems inside a Pokeball, designed to store and manage the electrical essence of contained Pokémon, would dominate the merged creature's nature, overwhelming the ghost-type characteristics that might have been present initially. What remains of the Haunter would manifest in Voltorb's behavior, its tendency towards self-destruction, its ability to appear in places where it shouldn't logically exist, its aggressive response to being touched or disturbed. These aren't the behaviors of a machine or even a typical Pokémon. They're the desperate reactions of a being that never wanted to exist in this form, that's constantly fighting against the circumstances of its creation. The evolution into Electrode adds another layer to this theory, suggesting that the trapped consciousness eventually adapts to its confinement, growing stronger and more stable over time. Electrode is larger than Voltorb, its color scheme inverted, as if the relationship between the ghost and the Pokeball has reversed, with the consciousness now dominating the container rather than being imprisoned by it. This would make evolution for this line completely different from how it works for other Pokemon, not a natural maturation process, but a gradual assertion of will, the trapped spirit learning to master its prison and transform it into a body it can truly control. Some versions of the theory propose an alternative origin, suggesting that Voltorb might be the result of a different kind of possession, not by Haunter, but by the residual energy of countless Pokémon that have been stored in Pokéballs over the years. Each time a Pokémon is converted to energy and contained, tiny fragments of its essence might remain in the ball after release, accumulating over hundreds or thousands of captures until enough psychic residue exists to achieve a kind of spontaneous consciousness. This would make Voltorb something like a technological ghost, an emergent entity formed from the accumulated memories and energies of all the creatures that had previously occupied its space. This variation carries its own unsettling implications, suggesting that Pokeballs might not be quite as perfectly safe as trainers assume, that the process of containing and releasing Pokemon leaves marks, creates changes that build up over time. Every Voltorb would then be a kind of memorial to all the Pokemon who passed through its ball form, carrying fragments of hundreds of consciousnesses, none of them complete enough to be truly aware, but all of them contributing to the strange, aggressive creature that emerges. It's a darker interpretation of a technology that the series usually presents as completely benign, raising questions about what it really means to store a living being as pure energy, what might be lost or altered in that conversion. The canonical explanation for Voltorb's existence, that it simply evolved naturally to mimic Pokeballs as a form of camouflage, feels insufficient when placed alongside these more elaborate theories. Natural evolution toward mimicry makes sense for many Pokemon, but the degree of similarity between Voltorb and man-made Pokeballs suggests something more deliberate at work. How would a Pokemon species evolve to perfectly resemble a human invention unless there was some direct connection between them? The timeline doesn't support the idea that Pokeballs were designed to look like a pre-existing Pokemon. The historical records make it clear that the technology came first, which means Voltorb's appearance must have come after, somehow shaped by or emerging from the existence of these containment devices. As we drift through these possibilities, the question becomes less about which explanation is correct, and more about what these theories reveal about how fans engage with the Pokemon world. The fact that a simple sphere-shaped Pokemon can generate such elaborate origin stories can support multiple complex theories about possession and technological horror demonstrates the richness of the universe that's been created. Every design choice, every unusual detail becomes a potential clue, a thread that can be pulled to unravel larger mysteries. Voltorb exists in the games and anime as a relatively minor Pokemon, a hazard to avoid, and occasionally a useful team member. But in the theoretical space that fans have constructed, it becomes something far more significant, a window into the dark implications of Pokemon storage technology and the blurred boundaries between natural and artificial life. Drifting further into the shadows of Pokemon lore, we encounter theories about Lavender Town, perhaps the most notorious location in the entire franchise for its association with unsettling stories and dark possibilities. The town itself appears innocent enough on the surface, a small settlement in Kanto defined primarily by its Pokemon Tower, a massive cemetery where trainers bring their deceased Pokemon to rest. But beneath this somber purpose, fans have detected something more disturbing, an atmosphere of genuine dread that seems to extend beyond the game itself, affecting players in the real world in ways that other locations never have. The most famous Lavender Town theory, one that achieved legendary status in internet creepypasta communities, involves the original background music composed for the location. The theme that plays when walking through Lavender Town in the Generation 1 games is notably different from music elsewhere in Pokémon, using high-pitched tones and a minor key melody that creates an eerie, unsettling atmosphere. Some players reported feeling physically ill while spending time in Lavender Town, experiencing headaches, dizziness, or a sense of profound unease that lingered even after they stopped playing. These reports, whether genuine or exaggerated by internet storytelling, became the foundation for theories about the music containing frequencies specifically designed to affect young players, or even about cursed versions of the game that used different, more dangerous sound files. The most extreme versions of these theories were clearly fabricated, stories about children dying after playing the original Japanese release, about secret frequencies that could cause seizures or worse. But underneath the sensationalism, there's something real about the unsettling quality of Lavender Town's presentation. The developers made deliberate choices to make this location feel different, to create an atmosphere of genuine sorrow and unease that stands out in a game otherwise full of adventure and optimism. Whether those choices had unintended effects on some players, or whether the entire phenomenon was a collective creation of online communities sharing and amplifying their discomfort, the result is the same. Lavender Town became a place that felt genuinely haunted, both in the game world and in the cultural memory of players. Within the game itself, Lavender Town presents several mysteries that have never been fully explained, starting with the Pokémon Tower's strange inhabitants. The tower is infested with ghost Pokémon, specifically the ghastly evolutionary line, which makes sense given the location's purpose as a burial ground. But there are also human ghosts, spirits of deceased individuals who appear as unidentifiable sprites, unable to be battled or even fully perceived without special equipment. The most famous of these is the ghost of a Marowak, the mother of an orphaned Cubone, who was killed by Team Rocket while defending her child. This ghost cannot be defeated or caught through normal means. It can only be put to rest by revealing its true nature with the Sylph Scope, at which point it finally appears as a Marowak and can be battled in what feels less like a Pokémon encounter and more like an exorcism. The existence of these genuine ghosts, spirits that persist after death and can interact with the living world, raises profound questions about the nature of reality in the Pokémon universe. If dead Pokémon can return as ghosts, what separates a ghost-type Pokémon like Ghastly from the ghost of a regular Pokémon like that Marowak? Are ghost types actually the spirits of dead creatures, or are they living beings that simply share characteristics with actual ghosts? The game never clearly answers these questions, leaving fans to construct theories that attempt to reconcile these different manifestations of supernatural existence. One theory proposes that ghost-type Pokémon are indeed the spirits of dead creatures, but from such ancient times that they've become something else entirely, their original identities lost as they transformed into new species over centuries or millennia of spectral existence. Ghastly might have once been the ghost of some other Pokémon, perhaps even a pre-evolutionary form of itself, that gradually changed over so much time that it became recognized as its own distinct type of being. This would explain why newer ghosts, like the Marowak, still appear as recognizable versions of their living selves. They haven't yet undergone the long transformation that would turn them into true ghost-type Pokémon. Given enough time, perhaps that Marowak would have become something unrecognizable, a new ghost species added to the world's ecosystem. Another interpretation focuses on the nature of the Pokémon Tower itself and what it reveals about death in this world. The tower is specifically designed as a final resting place for Pokémon, with multiple floors dedicated to graves and memorial sites, suggesting that the relationship between trainers and their Pokémon extends beyond life into death. The existence of a dedicated cemetery, maintained by the community and treated with reverence, indicates that Pokémon are considered valuable enough to deserve proper burial rites, that their deaths are mourned and commemorated. This is actually somewhat at odds with how death is usually treated in the series, where fainted Pokémon are simply taken to a Pokémon Center and healed, where the possibility of permanent loss is rarely acknowledged. The Mr. Fuji character, who appears in Lavender Town, adds another layer to these mysteries. Nepenthes, elderly man living adjacent to the Pokémon Tower, Fuji is presented as a kindly figure who cares for orphaned and abandoned Pokémon, giving them shelter when they have no trainers to return to. But his past is more complex than this simple characterization suggests. Fuji was once a scientist working on ambitious projects related to Pokémon genetics and possibly cloning, research that would later connect to the creation of Mewtwo, though his exact involvement varies depending on which version of the story you follow. This history casts his current life in Lavender Town in a different light, suggesting that his dedication to caring for abandoned Pokémon might be a form of penance for past transgressions, an attempt to make amends for crossing ethical boundaries in his earlier scientific work. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. The theory that connects Lavender Town most directly to the darker implications of the Pokémon world focuses on the unusually high number of orphaned Cubone that appear in the area. Cubone is defined by its origin story. Each one is born wearing the skull of its deceased mother, a piece of bone that becomes a permanent part of its identity. This raises an immediate question about Cubone reproduction and life cycle. If every Cubone requires its mother to die in order to be born, how does the species perpetuate itself? The biological implications are disturbing, suggesting either that Cubone mothers die as part of the birthing process, or that Cubone offspring somehow kill their mothers shortly after birth, or that the entire species exists in a state of constant tragedy where maternal death is simply expected and normalized. Lavender Town has an abundance of Cubone, more than you'd expect in a random distribution of Pokémon species, which has led some theorists to propose that the town serves as a kind of gathering place for these orphaned creatures. Perhaps Cubone are drawn to Lavender Town by the presence of so many spirits, seeking the ghosts of their mothers, or simply feeling comfortable in a place so saturated with death. Or perhaps the concentration of Cubone in the area is the result of something more sinister, experiments or accidents that have created more orphans than would occur naturally, Pokémon whose mothers were killed in circumstances that the game never fully explains. The most disturbing Cubone-related theory suggests that the skulls they wear aren't actually from their mothers at all, but are instead manufactured or provided by humans for reasons that remain unclear. This interpretation points to the suspicious uniformity of the skulls, all looking remarkably similar despite supposedly coming from different individual Marowak. If the skulls were genuinely from different Pokémon, you'd expect more variation in size, shape, and condition. The consistency suggests mass production, which raises questions about who would create such items and why. It's a theory that transforms Cubone from tragic victims of nature into victims of human interference, creatures marked by loss that might not even be genuinely theirs. Slowly, the story widens to encompass the entire region of Kanto and the role that death and loss play in its ecosystem. Lavender Town isn't the only place where these themes appear. They echo throughout the generation, in the abandoned Pokémon Mansion on Cinnabar Island, where Mewtwo was created, in the stories of extinct Pokémon like Aerodactyl and Kabutops being revived from fossils, in the Team Rocket plots that frequently involve threats to Pokémon lives. Generation 1, despite its bright colors and generally optimistic tone, is actually surprisingly dark when examined closely, full of references to death, loss, abandonment, and the consequences of human ambition pushing beyond ethical boundaries. These darker elements aren't mistakes or oversights. They're deliberate world-building choices that add depth and weight to the Pokémon universe. They suggest that this is a world with real stakes, where actions have permanent consequences, where not every story has a happy ending. The existence of the Pokémon Tower, the ghosts that haunt it, the orphaned Cubones wandering its grounds, all of these details tell us that the Pokémon world, for all its wonder and adventure, is also a place where tragedy occurs, where loved ones can be lost, where the past leaves scars that don't fully heal. As we continue drifting through these theories, the question of what happens to humans after death begins to emerge alongside questions about Pokémon mortality. The games and anime are notably reluctant to address human death directly, presenting a world where adults seem to live indefinitely and children never worry about losing their parents. But the presence of human ghosts in certain locations, the abandoned houses and forgotten graveyards that appear in various regions, suggests that death does occur. It's just not discussed openly. This avoidance creates space for theories about what death means in a world where ghost-type Pokémon exist, where the boundary between life and death seems more permeable than in our reality. One particularly unsettling theory proposes that some of the NPCs players encounter might actually be ghosts, spirits of deceased individuals who continue to exist in certain locations, unaware that they've died or unable to move on from places they frequented in life. This would explain some of the stranger NPC behaviors, characters who say odd things or who appear in locations where no living person would logically be, who vanish when you look away, or who seem to exist slightly outside of normal reality. The theory points to specific examples: the old man in Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, who stands on a bridge and mentions that he's waiting for someone who never comes; the strange NPCs in various games who speak in fragmented, cryptic ways that suggest they're not quite present in the same reality as the player; the ghost girl who appears in Lumiosa City in Pokémon X and Y is perhaps the most famous example of this phenomenon. A spirit who manifests in an elevator, delivers a single chilling line about not being the one, and then vanishes, leaving no trace of her existence. This encounter isn't connected to any quest or story event. It simply happens, a moment of genuine horror inserted into the game without explanation or resolution. The developers have never officially explained who this ghost girl is or what her message means, allowing fans to construct elaborate theories about her identity and purpose, theories that range from tragic backstories about accidental death to complex meta-narratives about the nature of NPCs in video games and whether they can become aware of their own unreality. These ghost encounters, scattered across multiple generations, create a sense that the Pokémon world is haunted in ways that go beyond ghost-type Pokémon, that there are genuine spirits lingering in certain places, unable or unwilling to move on. Whether these are the ghosts of trainers who died during their journeys, victims of accidents or violence, or something else entirely, their presence adds a layer of melancholy to exploration. Every abandoned building, every forgotten path, every location where the music turns somber and the colors dim might be home to spirits whose stories were never fully told, whose presence has become woven into the fabric of the world itself. There's a quiet comfort in remembering moments like these, even the sad ones, even the ones that remind us that not everything in the Pokémon world is adventure and friendship. The inclusion of death and loss, the acknowledgement that tragedy exists even in this generally optimistic universe, makes the bright moments brighter by contrast. It grounds the fantasy in something that feels more real, more emotionally honest. When we understand that there are stakes, that Pokémon and people can be lost, that some wounds never fully heal, the victories become more meaningful, the bonds between trainers and Pokémon more precious. The theory about Gengar being the shadow of a deceased Clefable has circulated for years, supported by visual similarities between the two Pokémon that seem too specific to be coincidental. If you examine the silhouettes of Gengar and Clefable carefully, you'll notice they're remarkably similar in overall shape, with rounded bodies, pointed ears, and similar limb proportions. The primary differences are in coloring and type. Clefable is pink and fairy type, while Gengar is purple and ghost poison type. But these differences could be explained if Gengar is actually what remains when a Clefable dies, its shadow or spirit given an independent existence as a ghost-type Pokémon. This theory gains additional support from Gengar's behavior and Pokédex entries, which frequently mention its connection to shadows and its habit of lurking in darkness. Several entries describe Gengar as a shadow that steals warmth from living beings, that drops the temperature in rooms it haunts, that mimics the shadows of people and Pokémon. This shadow-stealing behavior could be interpreted as Gengar trying to reclaim the substance it lost when it died, attempting to become solid again by absorbing the shadows of living things. If Gengar truly is the ghost of a Clefable, then its entire existence might be defined by this loss, by the memory of what it was before death transformed it into something darker. The names themselves provide another clue, with both containing similar phonetic elements that might not be coincidental. Clefable and Gengar share a certain rhythmic structure, and in Japanese, their names similarly echo each other in ways that suggest intentional pairing. This linguistic connection implies that the designers might have conceived of these two Pokémon as opposite sides of the same concept: light and shadow, life and death, fairy and ghost. Whether this connection is meant to be literal, with all Gengar being dead Clefable, or more metaphorical, with the two species representing opposing forces in the world's cosmology, remains open to interpretation. Some fans have extended this theory to include Clefairy as well, proposing that Ghastly is the ghost of a dead Clefairy, Haunter is the ghost of a dead Clefable, and the entire Ghastly evolutionary line mirrors the Clefairy line in this dark, spectral way. This version of the theory is less supported by visual evidence, since Ghastly and Haunter don't resemble their proposed living counterparts as closely as Gengar resembles Clefable, but it has a certain thematic appeal. It would mean that the cheerful, moon-loving Clefairy and its evolution have a shadow side, a dark reflection that emerges after death, transforming them from creatures of light and joy into beings of darkness and mischief. The implications of this theory extend beyond just these specific Pokémon to questions about what happens to Pokémon consciousness after death. If Clefable can become Gengar, if death doesn't end existence but transforms it, then every Pokémon that dies might potentially return as a ghost type. This would make ghost Pokémon far more tragic than they initially appear, each one carrying the memories and identity of whatever they were before death, trapped in a form that can never truly return to life. It reframes every ghost-type encounter as potentially a meeting with someone who was once something else, a creature whose current existence is defined entirely by loss and transformation. There's something almost poetic about the idea that Clefable, a Pokémon associated with the moon and with wishes, would become Gengar, a creature of shadows and darkness. The moon has always represented duality, brightness that exists in darkness, gentle light in the deep, night. If Clefable embodies the benevolent aspect of lunar symbolism, then Gengar might represent its opposite, the darker mysteries that the moon also carries, the way moonlight can make familiar places strange, the way night transforms the world into something both beautiful and unsettling. The two Pokémon together would form a complete picture of this duality, one representing life and hope, the other death and mischief, but both fundamentally connected to the same celestial body, the same source of power and meaning. Before we drift any further into these shadows, it's worth considering how these theories about death and transformation connect to larger questions about the Pokémon world's metaphysics. The existence of ghost types, the possibility of Pokémon returning after death, the presence of genuine spirits in certain locations, all of these elements suggest a universe where the boundary between life and death is far more permeable than in our reality. This isn't necessarily a dark revelation. It could actually be quite comforting, implying that death isn't an ending, but a transformation, that consciousness persists in some form, that loved ones don't truly leave us, but simply change into something different. Many theories have emerged attempting to explain the surprising demographics of the Pokémon world, particularly the puzzling absence of adult characters and the overwhelming prevalence of children operating independently in society. In most regions, the majority of trainers you encounter are young people, often preteens or teenagers, traveling without adult supervision and making significant life decisions on their own. Meanwhile, adults are notably scarce, appearing primarily in specific roles like gym leaders, professors, and occasional NPCs, but rarely as ordinary citizens going about normal adult lives. This demographic imbalance has led to some of the darkest theories in the fandom, proposals that attempt to explain where all the unsolved adults went and why children have been left to run the world. The war theory is perhaps the most well-known of these demographic explanations, proposing that a massive conflict occurred in the relatively recent past, one that killed or disabled a significant portion of the adult population. Lieutenant Surge, the Vermilion City gym leader in Kanto, provides the primary evidence for this theory through his dialogue, where he mentions that electric Pokémon saved his life during the war. This casual reference to a war is never expanded upon or explained in the games, leaving fans to wonder what conflict he's referring to when it occurred and what its consequences were for the region and the world at large. If there was indeed a war that required electric Pokémon to save lives, it must have been significant enough to involve Pokémon in combat roles, large enough to be remembered simply as the war, without need for further specification. The theory proposes that this conflict claimed the lives of many adults, particularly those of fighting age, leaving behind a generation of orphans and young people who had to mature quickly and take on adult responsibilities out of necessity. This would explain why children as young as 10 are allowed to leave home and travel the world alone, why they're entrusted with powerful Pokémon and expected to make their own way, why the entire social structure seems built around the young people operating independently rather than under adult guidance. The shortage of adult characters becomes even more noticeable when you consider family structures in the Pokémon world. Many player characters have only one parent shown in their homes, usually a mother, with no explanation provided for the other parent's absence. Fathers are particularly rare, appearing only occasionally and often in roles that keep them distant from their families. This single-parent prevalence could be explained by the war theory, suggesting that many fathers died in the conflict, leaving mothers to raise children alone. The absence of any discussion about these missing parents, the way the games simply present single-parent households as normal without comment, could be seen as the world having adapted to this reality, accepted it as the new normal in the aftermath of tragedy. Some versions of this theory extend to explain why Pokémon centers and healing services are completely free throughout all regions. In the aftermath of a devastating war, the surviving government structures might have implemented universal free healthcare for Pokémon as a way to prevent future conflicts, ensuring that everyone could maintain their Pokémon's health without economic barriers. The Nurse Joys stationed in every town, whether clones or not, would then be part of this post-war social infrastructure, a system designed to promote peace and prevent the kinds of circumstances that led to the previous conflict. The abundance of young trainers, all working toward becoming Pokémon masters, could be seen as a way to channel youthful energy and ambition toward the individual achievement rather than collective violence. The theory also attempts to explain the prevalence of criminal organizations like Team Rocket, Team Magma, and Team Aqua. In a world where so many adults died in a war, the remaining social structures would be weakened, creating power vacuums and opportunities for criminal enterprises to expand. The fact that these teams are often opposed primarily by children rather than adult law enforcement could reflect the simple reality that there aren't enough adult police officers or military personnel to handle these threats, forcing young trainers to step into roles that would normally be reserved for experienced professionals. Every time a 10-year-old protagonist defeats a criminal organization bent on reshaping the world, they're filling a gap left by the missing adults who should have been there to handle such threats. And Sputa's alternative demographic theory, slightly less dark but equally unsettling, proposes that humans in the Pokémon world simply don't live as long as humans in our reality. This would explain the shortage of elderly characters, the prevalence of young people in positions of power, and the general sense that life cycles through generations more quickly than we'd expect. If human lifespan in the Pokémon world averages 40 or 50 years rather than 70 or 80, then many of the demographic oddities resolve themselves. People would have children younger, reach positions of authority at younger ages, and die before they could become the wise elders we'd expect to find guiding society. The shorter lifespan theory could be explained through various environmental or biological factors unique to the Pokémon world. Perhaps exposure to Pokémon energy, which is constantly present in the environment, has subtle long-term effects on human biology that reduce longevity. Perhaps the world itself is more dangerous than our own, with Pokémon-related accidents and incidents creating higher mortality rates that pull down the average lifespan. Or perhaps humans in this universe simply evolved differently, with biological rhythms that run faster, achieving maturity earlier and aging more quickly as a trade-off for some other advantage. Yet another theory takes a different approach entirely, proposing that the shortage of adults is actually a shortage of adult perspective in the game's presentation, rather than a true demographic reality. This meta-theory suggests that we see mostly children and youth because the games are told from a child's perspective, focusing on what matters to young people while largely ignoring adult society. In this interpretation, there are plenty of adults in the Pokémon world, going about adult lives in adult spaces, but the games don't show us these spaces because they're not relevant to the story being told. The Pokémon centers, gyms, shops, and routes where we spend our time are youth-oriented spaces, places where children naturally congregate, so naturally, that's where we encounter mostly young people. This perspective-based explanation has merit in that it's the most optimistic interpretation, suggesting that the Pokémon world is actually quite normal in its demographics. We're just seeing a slice of it that's particularly focused on youth culture and adventure. But it struggles to fully account for some of the more specific oddities, like the prevalence of single-parent households, the absence of schools and traditional childhood institutions, the ease with which children obtain and operate dangerous equipment. A truly normal society would have more safeguards, more adult intervention in young people's lives, more concern about 10-year-olds wandering into dangerous caves or confronting criminal organizations. As we drift through these demographic mysteries, what becomes clear is that the Pokémon world's social structure is fundamentally different from our own in ways that the games rarely acknowledge directly. Whether this difference is due to war, shorter lifespans, different cultural values, or simply the narrative necessity of giving young players characters they can identify with. The result is a world where childhood looks very different from what we know. It's a world where children have extraordinary freedom and responsibility, where they're trusted with powerful creatures and expected to make their own moral and strategic decisions, where the transition from childhood to adulthood seems to happen early and without much ceremony. This unusual social structure might actually be connected to the role Pokémon play in society, serving not just as companions, but as a kind of maturity catalyst. The Pokémon journey that children embark on when they turn 10 isn't just about adventure or competitive battling. It's a rite of passage, a structured way for young people to prove themselves capable and responsible by successfully caring for Pokémon, by navigating the challenges of travel and battle, by making ethical decisions about how to train and treat their partners. Children demonstrate that they possess the qualities traditionally associated with adulthood: responsibility, compassion, strategic thinking, perseverance. In this sense, the Pokémon journey replaces many of the traditional childhood institutions, schools, organized activities structured family time with a more condensed and intense form of education that combines practical skills, moral development, and personal growth into a single extended experience. The badges earned from gym leaders serve as certifications of this development, marking not just battle prowess, but progression through the journey toward maturity. Each badge represents overcoming a specific challenge, proving specific capabilities, demonstrating growth in particular areas. By the time a trainer has collected the 8 badges, they've proven themselves in 8 different ways, against 8 different standards, suggesting they're ready for adult responsibilities. The fact that these badges are required to challenge the Elite Four and compete for the championship shows that the system has structure and progression built in. It's not just children wandering randomly, but following a path that society has established as a legitimate route to adulthood. Before we continue deeper into these societal theories, there's something worth noting about how the Pokémon world presents danger and safety to its young inhabitants. Despite allowing children remarkable freedom, the world also provides unusual levels of protection and support. Pokémon centers offer free healing and lodging, ensuring that no young trainer is ever without access to basic necessities. Gym leaders and other adult figures, while they may battle against child trainers, also serve as protectors and mentors, stepping in when real danger threatens. Criminal organizations, for all their bluster, rarely pose genuine lethal threats to protagonist children, suggesting there might be unspoken rules or boundaries that even villains respect. The world is dangerous enough to test young people, to give them meaningful challenges and opportunities for growth, but not so dangerous that they're likely to come to serious harm. This careful balance between freedom and protection might be the most telling detail about Pokémon society's attitude toward childhood. It's a world that believes children are capable of great things, that trusts them with significant responsibilities, but that also maintains safety nets and support systems to catch them when they stumble. It's not about throwing children into the wilderness and hoping they survive. It's about creating an environment where they can take real risks and face real challenges, while knowing that if they truly need help, it's available. This might be the real explanation for the demographic oddities, not that adults are absent, but that they've deliberately stepped back, created spaces where young people can operate independently while remaining present enough to intervene if needed. Another cluster of theories focuses on the true nature of humans in the Pokémon world and whether they might themselves be a type of Pokémon, just one that's evolved intelligence and civilization to such a degree that they've forgotten their origins. This theory emerges from several pieces of evidence scattered across the games and anime, starting with the ancient texts found in Canalave City's library in the Sinnoh region. These texts describe a time when humans and Pokémon were indistinguishable from one another, when there was no clear boundary between the two categories. Some translations suggest that humans and Pokémon even married one another in ancient times, implying a much closer relationship, perhaps even a shared nature, that has since been forgotten or suppressed. Pokédex entries for certain Pokémon support this theory in subtle ways. Kadabra's entry mentions a boy who woke up one morning to find he had transformed into a Pokémon, suggesting that the boundary between human and Pokémon might be more permeable than generally assumed. If a human can become a Pokémon, even in rare circumstances, it implies that humans and Pokémon might be fundamentally similar enough to undergo such transformation. Yamask's entry is even more explicit, stating that each Yamask carries a mask that was its face when it was human, confirming that at least some ghost-type Pokémon were once human beings who transformed after death. These transformation examples raise profound questions about what defines a human versus a Pokémon in this universe. If the distinction can be crossed, if humans can become Pokémon, and if ancient humans were indistinguishable from Pokémon, then perhaps the current separation is more cultural and behavioral than biological. Humans might simply be Pokémon who developed language, tool use, and civilization, who stopped living in the wild and started building cities, who forgot that they were once part of the same ecosystem as the creatures they now catch and train. This would make the entire structure of Pokémon training deeply ironic. One species of Pokémon capturing and commanding other species while denying their own nature. The theory gains additional support from considering human abilities in the Pokémon world that seem to exceed normal human capabilities. Characters regularly survive attacks from powerful Pokémon that should logically be lethal, falls from great heights that would kill ordinary humans, explosions and energy blasts that leave them bruised but alive. Trainers can communicate with their Pokémon in ways that suggest telepathy or deep empathy beyond normal human capacity. Some characters, particularly those with psychic abilities, can use powers that are essentially identical to Pokémon: moves, teleportation, telepathy, precognition, suggesting that humans in this world possess latent abilities that align them more closely with Pokémon than with humans from our reality. If humans are indeed a type of Pokémon, it would explain many of the world's oddities. The existence of human Pokémon communication and bonding, so central to the series, would make more sense if it was one species of Pokémon, understanding another rather than a cross-species empathy. The way Pokémon seem to naturally accept human authority, to willingly enter Pokéballs and follow commands, might reflect an instinctive recognition of humans as a kind of alpha Pokémon, a species that evolved dominance not through physical power, but through intelligence and strategy. The type system that categorizes all Pokémon might even include humans in an unacknowledged category, perhaps a normal type by default, or some unique type that humanity alone possesses. This theory intersects with other theories in interesting ways, particularly those about humans being an invasive species in the Pokémon world. If humans are Pokémon who somehow became distinct from other Pokémon, then their invasion might be more of a colonization, one group of Pokémon establishing dominance over the others and rewriting the world's ecology to suit their needs. This would make the current state of the Pokémon world a relatively recent development, with most of history belonging to a time when Pokémon of all kinds, including the ones that would become humans, lived in relative equality without the hierarchical structure of trainers and trained. The ancient texts that describe Pokémon creating the continents and oceans, Pokémon establishing the basic structure of reality, take on new meaning under this interpretation. If humans are themselves Pokémon, then all of civilization, all of human achievement, is actually Pokémon achievement, the accomplishment of one particularly clever and ambitious species that managed to reshape the world according to its will. The cities and roads and technology that seem to separate humans from wild Pokémon would then be equivalent to the elaborate nests of certain bird Pokémon or the complex colony structures of bug types, just on a vastly larger and more sophisticated scale. Some fans have proposed that humans might specifically be failed or artificial Pokémon, creatures created through ancient experiments that went wrong or right depending on your perspective, that developed beyond their original purpose. This variation of the theory suggests that there might have once been an advanced civilization of actual Pokémon, perhaps psychic types or other intelligent species, who attempted to create a servant species through genetic engineering or similar means. These created beings, the proto-humans, exceeded their creators' expectations and eventually supplanted them, establishing themselves as the dominant species while their creators either died out or faded into the background, becoming the legendary Pokémon of myth and story. This darker interpretation would explain why legendary Pokémon often seem disappointed in humanity, why they hide themselves away or test trainers so rigorously before accepting them. The legendaries would be the descendants or remnants of the original creators, watching with mixed feelings as their created species dominates the world, sometimes proud of what humans have achieved, but often dismayed by how they've used their gifts. It would make every encounter between a human trainer and a legendary Pokémon a kind of family reunion, a meeting between creator and creation, though neither party might fully remember the relationship that once existed between their species. There's a quiet comfort in remembering moments like these, in sitting with the strange implications of what these theories suggest about identity and belonging in the Pokémon world. If humans are Pokémon, then every trainer is part of the ecosystem they're studying and interacting with, not separate observers, but participants in a much larger community of living beings. It changes the nature of the Pokémon journey from one species trying to understand another to a journey of self-discovery, humans learning about Pokémon to ultimately learn about themselves, to reconnect with parts of their own nature that civilization has obscured or forgotten. The theory about Pokémon eating other Pokémon while disturbing on the surface is actually well supported by canonical evidence and raises important questions about the food chain and ecosystem in the Pokémon world. Early in the franchise, regular animals appeared occasionally alongside Pokémon, fish in aquariums, birds in the sky, normal creatures that provided an obvious food source for both humans and carnivorous Pokémon. But as the series progressed, these regular animals gradually disappeared, edited out of newer episodes and games until the Pokémon world became one where Pokémon are apparently the only fauna, the only animals that exist. This creates an immediate problem. If there are no regular animals, what do carnivorous Pokémon eat? The Pokédex provides some unsettling answers, though they're scattered across different entries and often presented in matter-of-fact language that disguises their darker implications. Pidgeot is described as a natural predator of Magikarp, swooping down to catch the fish Pokémon in its talons and carry them away. Victreebel is said to lure small Pokémon into its mouth with sweet scent before digesting them. Ekans preys on Pidgey eggs, while Heatmore feeds exclusively on Durant, creating a predator-prey relationship that mirrors real-world ecology. These entries confirm that Pokémon do indeed eat other Pokémon, that a food chain exists in this world where some species survive by consuming others. What makes this particularly dark is the implication that trainers participate in this system, albeit indirectly. When you catch a Pidgeot and use it in battle, you're utilizing a creature that in the wild would survive by hunting and eating other Pokémon, possibly even species that your other team members belong to. Your Pokémon team might contain both predators and prey, creatures that in nature would have a kill or be killed relationship, but that through training and domestication have learned to coexist peacefully. This raises questions about what happens to Pokémon dietary needs when they're caught, whether Pokémon centers provide food that satisfies carnivorous requirements without requiring actual hunting, or whether trainers are expected to facilitate their Pokémon's natural feeding behaviors in some way the games never show. The theory extends to consider what Pokémon trainers themselves eat in a world where Pokémon seem to be the only animals. The games and anime occasionally show people eating meat, suggesting that regular animals do exist, somewhere off-screen to provide food, but other evidence points toward a darker possibility. Slowpoke tails are mentioned as a delicacy in the Johto region, sold illegally by Team Rocket, confirming that people in the Pokémon world do eat Pokémon meat. Far-fetched is described in Pokédex entries as being nearly extinct because it's delicious, hunted to near extinction specifically for food. These examples prove that humans consume Pokémon, not just in extreme survival situations, but as a normal part of their diet. The existence of Pokémon ranches and farms, places where Pokémon are raised specifically for human benefit, takes on new meaning in this context. When the games show Miltank being raised for their milk or Wooloo being kept for their wool, it's easy to assume these are the only products being harvested from farm Pokémon. But in a world where Pokémon seem to be the primary or only source of animal protein, the logical extension is that some Pokémon must be raised for meat, kept in conditions similar to livestock farms in our world. The games never show this directly, maintaining the family-friendly illusion that all Pokémon are companions and partners, but the economic realities of feeding a human population would seem to require it. This creates an uncomfortable moral dimension to the Pokémon world that the series generally avoids addressing. If some Pokémon are raised and slaughtered for food, while others are trained as companions and treated almost like family members, what determines which Pokémon fall into which category? Is it just species-based, with certain types considered suitable for eating and others for partnership? Or is it more arbitrary, based on individual Pokémon characteristics, with particularly clever or powerful individuals being spared from the food chain while their less impressive relatives end up on dinner plates? The lack of any clear ethical framework for making these distinctions suggests that the Pokémon world might have normalized a relationship with Pokémon that includes both deep companionship and casual consumption without seeing any contradiction. Certain Pokémon species seem particularly vulnerable to being treated as food sources based on their designs and Pokédex entries. Magikarp is frequently mentioned in contexts that suggest it should be edible, though Misty's claim that it tastes terrible might be what keeps the species from being overfished to extinction. Cherubi, a cherry-themed Pokémon, is described as having a second head that's packed with nutrients and sweetness. Vanillite and its evolutions, despite being living creatures, are literally designed to look like ice cream, raising the question of whether they're edible, and if so, whether people regularly consume them. The line between Pokémon as living beings deserving of respect and Pokémon as resources to be harvested seems uncomfortable blurry. The theory about Pokémon eating Pokémon also helps explain some of the type-based interactions and behaviors seen throughout the series. Flying types naturally hunt water, and bug types, because that's what birds do, they eat fish and insects. Fire types might prey on grass types, ice types on flying types, creating a complex web of predator-prey relationships that mirrors real ecosystems, but with the added complexity of elemental types adding another layer to who can successfully hunt whom. Every type matchup in battle could be seen as reflecting natural predatory relationships, with super effective attacks representing the advantage a predator has over its natural prey. Some Pokédex entries are more explicitly dark about consumption, describing Pokémon that eat parts of other Pokémon or even people. Wailord consumes vast quantities of plankton, which might include numerous tiny water-type Pokémon. Victreebel not only eats Pokémon, but is specifically noted to occasionally eat people who get too close, making it one of the few Pokémon confirmed to be a threat to human life through predation. The Ultra Beasts, invasive Pokémon from other dimensions, have entries describing destructive feeding behaviors that devastate entire ecosystems, suggesting that the predator-prey dynamics of the Pokémon world can become catastrophically unbalanced when new species are introduced. The existence of parasite Pokémon adds another layer to this consumption theory. Paraz is a bug Pokémon that has mushrooms growing on its back, mushrooms that gradually take control of the host until Paras evolves into parasect, at which point the mushrooms are fully in control and the bug beneath is essentially a puppet. This isn't traditional eating, but it is one organism consuming another from the inside, using it as a host and energy source. Similarly, certain ghost types like Dryfloon are said to attempt to carry away children, with implications about what happens to those children that the Pokédex carefully doesn't specify, but that seem unlikely to be benign. Slowly, the story widens to encompass questions about conservation and extinction in a world where Pokémon are both sapient beings and food sources. If Pokémon can communicate, form friendships with humans, demonstrate complex emotions, and problem-solving abilities, how does society justify eating them? The parallel to real-world discussions about eating intelligent animals like pigs or octopi is obvious, but the Pokémon world takes it further by including species that can speak human language, that clearly possess human-level or even superhuman intelligence. When you can have a telepathic conversation with a psychic-type Pokémon, when you can hear the thoughts and feelings of a ghost type, does it become harder to justify treating any Pokémon as mere food? The games largely sidestep these questions by rarely showing anyone actually eating Pokémon meat on screen, maintaining a kind of strategic ambiguity about what people eat and where it comes from. Pokémon centers serve food, markets sell groceries, restaurants operate in cities, but the specific ingredients are almost never detailed. This allows players to imagine that everyone in the Pokémon world is vegetarian if they choose, or that regular non-Pokémon animals exist somewhere off-screen providing meat, maintaining the comfortable fiction that no Pokémon are harmed for food. But the occasional slip, the references to slowpoke tales, and far-fetched stakes remind us that this fiction is fragile, that the reality underneath might be much darker than the cheerful surface suggests. There's something almost melancholic about considering these implications, about recognizing that the Pokémon world, for all its adventure and wonder, might also be a place where difficult moral compromises are made daily, where the same creatures that can be your best friends can also be another creature's dinner. It mirrors the real world in uncomfortable ways, reminding us that nature is red in tooth and claw even in fantasy settings, that the cycle of life and death includes consumption and predation, that even in a world where animals can talk and think and feel, the fundamental requirements of survival haven't changed. Some eat and some are eaten, and the presence of consciousness and communication doesn't necessarily alter that basic reality. One of the most philosophically intriguing theories, one that recontextualizes everything we think we know about the Pokémon world's history, proposes that humans are actually an invasive species, colonizers, who came from elsewhere and established themselves as the dominant force in an ecosystem that was never meant to include them. This theory emerges from considering the creation myths and legendary Pokémon lore that appears in later generations, particularly in Sinnoh and beyond. According to these ancient stories, Pokémon created the world, legendary beings shaped the continents and oceans, established the laws of nature, created time and space and matter itself. Humans appear nowhere in these creation accounts, suggesting they weren't part of the original design, that they came later from somewhere else. The theory proposes that humans originated on a different planet or in a different dimension, arriving in the Pokémon world at some point in the distant past and establishing themselves despite being fundamentally alien to the ecosystem. This would explain several peculiarities about human presence in the Pokémon world, starting with the fact that humans seem to have no natural place in the type system or ecology. Every other organism in the world is a Pokémon with specific types and roles, but humans exist outside this classification, neither predator nor prey in the natural order, not fitting into any evolutionary chain or environmental niche that existed before they arrived. If humans are invasive, it would explain why there are so many new Pokémon discovered in each generation. Native explorers in an ecosystem they evolved in would have encountered and cataloged most species long ago, but colonizers arriving from elsewhere would constantly be discovering species that were always there but new to them. Each new region that players visit in the games could represent not newly formed land, but newly explored land, territories that humans are only just now reaching and documenting. The Pokédex itself, far from being a comprehensive encyclopedia of all Pokémon, might be more like an ongoing colonial survey, cataloging species as humans encounter them during their gradual expansion across the planet. This theory also provides a dark explanation for why there are proportionally so many children in the Pokémon world and relatively few elderly people. If humans are recent arrivals, still in their first or second generation of colonization, then most of the population would be young, the children and grandchildren of the original colonists. The elderly population that would normally exist in an established society would be small because the colony itself is young, without the deep generational roots that create aged populations. The fact that children are sent out on journeys at age 10 might not be cultural tradition, but practical necessity, a young colony that needs to expand and explore rapidly, that can't afford to keep its youth sheltered and dependent for extended periods. Professor Oak's famous opening speech in the Generation 1 games takes on entirely new meaning in this context. "Welcome to the world of Pokémon," he says, speaking as if the player is arriving somewhere new, somewhere they haven't been before. "This world is inhabited by creatures called Pokémon," he continues, explaining basic facts as if to someone who might not know them, someone who might be from somewhere else entirely. His entire introduction reads like an orientation for newcomers, for people who have just arrived in a world they don't understand, which makes perfect sense if humans are indeed recent arrivals still familiarizing themselves with their new home. The technology humans possess in the Pokémon world, particularly Pokéballs and the PC system, seems strangely advanced compared to the level of development in other areas, suggesting it might have been brought from elsewhere rather than developed locally. Humans can digitize living beings, store them as data, and transmit them across vast distances instantly, but they still use relatively primitive transportation methods and live in modest houses. This technological imbalance makes more sense if the high-tech items are remnants or knowledge from the original human civilization, wherever it was, while everything else has had to be rebuilt from scratch in the new world. Some variations of this theory propose that humans fled to the Pokémon world from a dying planet, bringing with them only the children and the technology necessary for survival and colonization. This would explain the shortage of adults. They died back on the original world or during the journey, leaving the children to establish themselves in this new place. It would also explain why children are given so much responsibility and independence. There simply aren't enough adults to provide traditional parental guidance and supervision, forcing young people to mature quickly and take on roles that would normally belong to their elders. The entire structure of Pokémon training, sending children out into the world at 10, might have emerged as a way to rapidly acclimate the young colonists to their new environment, teaching them about Pokémon and the ecosystem through direct immersion and experience. This interpretation transforms the relationship between humans and Pokémon from natural partnership into something more complicated and potentially colonial. Humans capturing Pokémon in balls, training them to follow commands, using them to battle each other and accomplish human goals. All of these practices might be expressions of human dominance, ways of asserting control over a world that doesn't naturally include or welcome them. The fact that Pokémon largely accept this arrangement, that they seem willing to be caught and trained, could be explained in various ways. Perhaps humans brought technology or knowledge that makes them valuable to Pokémon. Perhaps there's some form of symbiosis that benefits both species, or perhaps Pokémon simply haven't yet organized effective resistance against the invasive species that's gradually taking over their world. The various villain teams that appear throughout the series take on new meaning as potential responses to human colonization. Team Plasma's stated goal of liberating Pokémon from trainers could be seen as recognizing the colonial nature of human-Pokémon relations and trying to restore the natural order. Team Galactic's plan to reshape the universe might be an extreme reaction to the realization that humans don't fit properly into the world as it exists, attempting to create a new reality where humans have a legitimate place. Even the more straightforward criminal organizations like Team Rocket could be understood as groups who've rejected the agreed-upon rules of colonization, choosing to exploit Pokémon more openly rather than maintaining the fiction of partnership and mutual benefit. Before your eyes grow heavy, it's worth considering how this theory reframes the entire narrative arc of the Pokémon series. If humans are colonizers, then every Pokémon journey is part of a larger colonial project. Individual trainers mapping territory, documenting species, establishing human presence and control in areas that were previously wild. The badges earned from gym leaders mark successful integration into human society, proof that you've learned to operate according to human rules and values in this world. The championship, the ultimate goal of becoming a Pokémon master, represents full membership in the colonial elite, joining the small group of humans who have achieved complete mastery over Pokémon and full authority within human society. Yet there's also something potentially redemptive in this interpretation, particularly if we imagine that humans came to the Pokémon world not as conquerors, but as refugees, desperate people fleeing a catastrophe and finding sanctuary in a world that, while strange, offered them a chance at survival. In this version, the relationship with Pokémon evolved from necessity rather than dominance, humans learning to communicate and cooperate with Pokémon because they had no other choice, because they were weak and outnumbered and dependent on the goodwill of the native species. The Pokéball might then be less a tool of capture and more a technology for creating safe spaces where humans and Pokémon could coexist, allowing partnership without requiring either species to fully adapt to the other's way of living. This gentler interpretation would make the Pokémon world a story about successful integration and mutual adaptation, two different forms of life learning to coexist despite their differences. The fact that many Pokémon seem to prefer living with humans to living in the wild, that they willingly stay in their balls and follow their trainers even when they have opportunities to leave, might indicate that the arrangement benefits them as well, provides them with experiences and growth opportunities they wouldn't have in purely natural settings. The bonds between trainers and Pokémon, shown again and again throughout the series as genuine and powerful, could be evidence that whatever colonial impulses might have existed at the start have evolved into something more mutual and respectful. As we drift deeper into the night, towards the final theories that will carry us into sleep, there's a question worth holding gently. Does it matter whether humans belong in the Pokémon world or whether they're invaders who've made themselves at home? The reality is that they're there now, have been there for generations, have built a society and culture intertwined with Pokémon, in ways that couldn't easily be unwound. Whether that presence is natural or invasive, indigenous or colonial, the relationship exists and continues to evolve, shaped by each new generation of trainers and Pokémon who choose how they'll relate to each other. The theories about human origins ask us to think critically about that relationship, to question assumptions about dominance and belonging, but they don't necessarily prescribe answers. Instead, they open up space for reflection on what it means to share a world with other forms of consciousness, other ways of being. In the final stretches of our journey through these theories tonight, we arrive at perhaps the most fundamental question of all. What happens to Pokémon when they die, and what does that mean for the spirits and ghosts that populate the world? We've already touched on this topic when discussing Lavender Town and the theory about Gengar being Clefable's ghost, but there are deeper implications to explore, questions about consciousness and afterlife that the Pokémon world raises, but never fully answers. The existence of ghost-type Pokémon creates an immediate philosophical puzzle. Are they actually dead beings returned to some form of life, or are they living creatures that simply share characteristics with traditional ghosts? The Pokédex provides conflicting information on this question, with some entries suggesting that ghost types are literal spirits, while others present them as normal living Pokémon who just happen to have ghostly attributes. Yamask's entry clearly states that each one carries the mask that was its face when it was human, confirming that at least this species is composed of transformed human spirits. Phantump is said to be the spirit of a child who died while lost in the forest, their soul becoming trapped in a tree stump. These entries indicate that some ghost types are indeed deceased beings who have returned in altered form, not fully alive, but not entirely gone either. Other ghost types seem to be living creatures with no connection to death at all, Pokémon who are born as ghosts rather than becoming ghosts after dying. Misdreavus appears to be a naturally occurring ghost type with no backstory of previous life or death, simply a species that exists with these particular properties. Sableye and Spiritomb are similarly presented as originally ghost types rather than transformed spirits. This creates a taxonomy problem. If some ghost types are dead beings and others are living species, what connects them? Why are they grouped into the same type category if their fundamental natures are so different? One theory proposes that all ghost-type Pokémon, even those that appear to be naturally occurring species, are actually descended from ancient spirits, the evolutionary offspring of beings who died long ago and whose consciousness persisted long enough to establish new reproductive lines. In this interpretation, Ghastly might be the direct spirits of recently deceased Pokémon, while Misdreavus could be the distant descendants of Pokémon who died so long ago that they've evolved into a distinct stable species that reproduces normally while retaining the ghostly properties of their spectral ancestors. This would make the ghost type a kind of echo of death, all ghost types carrying the memory of mortality in their being, even when they themselves have never died. This theory connects to the larger question of what consciousness is in the Pokémon world and whether it can truly be destroyed. If death can be survived, if consciousness can persist and even evolve after the body dies, then death itself becomes less final, less absolute than in our reality. The implication is that the Pokémon world might have a kind of conservation of consciousness law, similar to conservation of energy in physics, where awareness and identity can change form but can't be created or destroyed. Every being that ever existed might still exist somewhere, in some form, whether as a ghost-type Pokémon, a wandering spirit, or something else entirely. The relationship between ghost types and other types takes on new significance under this interpretation. Ghost attacks being super effective against other ghost types could represent spirits having unique insight into each other's vulnerabilities, knowing exactly where to strike because they understand their own nature so well. Normal types being immune to ghost attacks, while ghost types are immune to fighting, and normal attacks creates a strange asymmetry, as if the living and dead exist in partially separate realities that overlap but don't fully interact. This could be read as a metaphor for how the dead and living relate in general, able to perceive each other and sometimes influence each other, but fundamentally existing in different states that prevent complete connection. Certain locations in the Pokémon world seem to serve as thin places where the boundary between life and death becomes permeable, where spirits can more easily manifest, and where the living can more easily perceive them. Lavender Town's Pokémon Tower is the most obvious example, a place dedicated to death where ghost types congregate and human spirits sometimes appear. Mount Pyre in Hoenn serves a similar function, a mountain cemetery where the spirits of both Pokémon and people are said to rest. These locations aren't just settings for ghost-type encounters, they're conceptual spaces where the rules of reality bend slightly, where death doesn't mean quite the same thing it does elsewhere. The existence of mediums and channelers in the Pokémon world, people who can supposedly communicate with the dead, suggests that there's a recognized spiritual dimension to reality that coexists with the material world. These individuals aren't presented as frauds or delusional within the world of the games and anime. Their abilities are real and respected. They can genuinely contact spirits and relay messages from the departed. This implies a cosmology where death opens up new forms of existence rather than ending existence altogether, where the boundary between life and death is more like a membrane than a wall, penetrable by those with the right abilities or in the right locations. Some theories propose that legendary Pokémon might be related to death and the afterlife in ways that haven't been fully revealed, serving as psychopomps or guardians of the boundary between worlds. Giratina, the renegade legendary of the Sinnoh region, lives in the distortion world, a realm that exists parallel to normal reality with different physical laws and strange properties. This could be interpreted as a kind of afterlife or liminal space, and Giratina as a guardian or ruler of that space, managing the transition between life and whatever comes after. Yveltal, the destruction legendary from Kalos, absorbs life energy when it dies and is said to drain the life from everything around it, suggesting it might have some role in managing death itself, perhaps serving as a kind of cosmic recycler that ensures life energy returns to circulation. As you drift off tonight, perhaps you'll dream of Ho-Oh soaring through gray skies, granting blessings that last forever. Perhaps you'll imagine Nurse Joyce working tirelessly through the night, whether human or clone or Pokémon in disguise, caring for injured creatures with infinite patience. Perhaps you'll wander through Lavender Town in your sleep, hearing the haunting music and wondering what spirits linger in that place, what stories they might tell if they could speak. Perhaps you'll envision ancient humans arriving in the Pokémon world for the first time, refugees from a dying world finding hope in a place that would become their new home. The theories we've explored tonight offer no definitive answers, and perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Mystery is valuable. Questions are worth asking even when they can't be answered with certainty. The Pokémon world is richer for being somewhat unknowable, for containing spaces where fans can project their own ideas and interpretations, where multiple explanations can coexist without invalidating each other. Every trainer's journey is different, not just in terms of which Pokémon they catch or which path they take, but in terms of what meaning they derive from the experience, what questions they ask about what they encounter, what theories they construct to make sense of the strange and wonderful world they're exploring. In the end, the theories matter less for their truth value than for what they represent. Deep engagement with something we love, sustained attention to details that might otherwise go unnoticed, willingness to think critically and creatively about the stories we're told and the worlds we visit. The fans who create and share these theories are doing important work, keeping the Pokémon world alive in the spaces between official releases, ensuring that there's always something new to discover or reconsider, always another angle from which to view familiar elements. Among all the theories that circulate through the Pokémon community, few are as elegant or as widely accepted as the theory connecting Ditto to Mew, proposing that the common pink blob Pokémon found in various locations might actually be a failed clone of the rarest legendary creature in the original games. This theory emerged from observing several remarkable similarities between these two Pokémon that seem too specific to be coincidental, starting with their coloring. Both Ditto and Mew are pink in their normal forms, and both turn blue when shiny, a color coordination that doesn't occur randomly among Pokémon species. This shared palette suggests some fundamental connection between them, some reason why they would both default to the same unusual coloring. The similarities extend beyond appearance to abilities and statistics, creating a pattern that becomes harder to dismiss as mere coincidence the more carefully you examine it. Ditto and Mew are the only two Pokémon that can naturally learn Transform, the ability to become a perfect copy of another Pokémon, temporarily adopting their appearance, moves, and stats. This shared signature ability is particularly significant because Transform isn't just rare, it's essentially unique to these two species, suggesting they might share some fundamental aspect of their nature that allows for this kind of radical self-alteration. No other Pokémon possesses this ability naturally, making it a clear link between Ditto and Mew. Their base stats tell a similar story of connection. Mew has perfectly balanced base stats, with every stat, HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed at exactly 100 points. This perfect symmetry is unique among all Pokémon, representing the idea that Mew is the genetic ancestor of all Pokémon species, containing within itself the potential for any specialization. Ditto's stats are less impressive, but still perfectly balanced at 48 points in each category, exactly the same distribution pattern as Mew, but at a much lower power level. This parallel in statistical design suggests that Ditto is an attempt to recreate Mew's perfect balance, an effort that succeeded in matching the pattern, but failed to replicate the power. The theory proposes that Ditto is the result of failed attempts to clone Mew, experiments that produced creatures with some of Mew's abilities and characteristics, but not the full power or stability of the original. These failed clones, unable to maintain a stable unique form, default to a simple amorphous shape, pink and blob-like, that can only demonstrate their heritage through their ability to transform into other Pokémon. Every Ditto would then be a kind of broken Mew, a creature that contains the genetic potential for perfection, but lacks the structure to manifest it permanently, forced instead to borrow forms from other Pokémon because it can't sustain its own. Evidence for this cloning connection appears in the locations where Ditto can be found in the original games. In Generation 1, Ditto appears in the Pokémon Mansion on Cinnabar Island, the same location where players find journals describing experiments to clone Mew and create Mewtwo. The mansion is abandoned and partially destroyed by the time players arrive, suggesting that something went catastrophically wrong with the experiments conducted there. The presence of Ditto in this facility, creatures that share key characteristics with Mew but in diminished form, supports the idea that they're the failed byproducts of the cloning experiments, organisms that emerged from the process but didn't meet the researchers' goals. The journals found in the mansion described the cloning process as difficult and unpredictable, with many attempts failing before the successful creation of Mewtwo. What happened to those failures? The theory suggests that the Ditto found in the mansion are exactly those failures, clones that didn't develop properly but survived nonetheless, escaping or being released into the wild, where they established themselves as their own species. Some might have been the earliest attempts, produced before the scientists refined their techniques. Others might be the result of the chaos that destroyed the mansion, unstable genetic material gaining life during the facility's final days, shaped by the ambient energy and trauma into something that could survive but couldn't thrive. This interpretation transforms Ditto from a simple, normal-type Pokémon into something more tragic and more significant, a species that exists only because of human ambition and error, creatures who carry within themselves the potential for greatness but can never fully realize it. Every time a Ditto transforms, it's briefly becoming what it could have been if the cloning had succeeded, temporarily experiencing completeness and power before inevitably reverting to its default diminished state. There's something profoundly melancholic about this reading, the idea that Ditto spends its entire existence borrowing forms because it has no complete form of its own, that it's forever imitating rather than being. The fact that Ditto can breed with almost any Pokémon, serving as a universal breeding partner in daycare centers, takes on new meaning in this context. If Ditto contains fragments of Mew's genetic code, and if Mew is the ancestor of all Pokémon species, then Ditto's ability to breed with such a wide variety of species makes perfect sense. It's tapping into that ancestral compatibility, using the genetic potential inherited from Mew to interface with other Pokémon's reproductive systems. This would make Ditto breeding not just a game mechanic convenience, but a reflection of its nature as a partial Mew, able to access some of the legendary's universal compatibility, even if it can't access its power. The transform ability itself becomes more poignant when understood as a kind of genetic memory, Ditto accessing the potential within its flawed DNA to briefly become something else, to escape its own limited form and experience what it might be like to be whole. When a Ditto transforms into a powerful dragon type or a graceful psychic type, it's not just copying for tactical advantage, it's trying to fill the void at its core, using other Pokémon's complete forms to compensate for its own incompleteness. The transformation is always temporary, always an imperfect if you look closely enough, always an ending with a return to that simple pink blob. But for those moments while it lasts, Ditto gets to experience wholeness. Some variations of this theory propose that the different Ditto found around the world might represent different stages or types of failure in the cloning process, each one slightly different in what went wrong during its creation. The Ditto in the Pokémon Mansion would be the earliest experiments, the crudest attempts before the scientists understood what they were doing. Ditto found in other locations might be descendants of these original failures, offspring that inherited the unstable genetics and passed them down through generations. Or they might be additional failed clones from other facilities, other laboratories that attempted to recreate Mew using similar techniques and met with similar partial success. The shiny coloration shared by Ditto and Mew provides one final piece of supporting evidence, both turning blue when they manifest their rare variant coloring. This isn't just any blue, but a similar shade, suggesting that whatever genetic factors control coloration in Mew are also present in Ditto, mutated perhaps, but still fundamentally the same. When a shiny Ditto transforms into another Pokémon, it retains its blue tint, unable to fully mask its true nature even when copying another form. This persistence of color through transformation could be read as Ditto's Mew heritage bleeding through, a reminder of what it is beneath all the borrowed shapes. The emotional resonance of this theory comes from how it reframes a common, often overlooked Pokémon into something with depth and tragedy. Ditto isn't just a useful breeding tool or a quirky normal type. It's a creature born from failure, marked by incompleteness, forever seeking wholeness through imitation. It transforms the entire species into a kind of monument to human hubris, a reminder that attempting to recreate legendary beings often produces something diminished rather than something enhanced. Yet despite being failures by the standards of their creators, Ditto have thrived, carving out their own ecological niche and proving that even imperfect creations can find ways to survive and even to be valuable in their own right. As we drift toward the very end of our journey through these theories, there's one more idea worth exploring, a theory that exists at the intersection of game design and the universe explanation, addressing the question of why some Pokémon appear to be deliberately designed to look human-made. We've discussed Voltorb and Electrode, but they're not the only Pokémon whose existence seems tied to human technology or culture in ways that raise questions about natural evolution versus artificial creation. Magnemite and its evolutions are clearly mechanical, composed of metal parts and powered by magnetism and electricity in ways that suggest engineering rather than biology. Trubbish and Garbodor are literally animated garbage bags filled with trash. Vanillite is an ice cream cone. How did these Pokémon come to exist? One theory proposes that certain Pokémon species are actually relatively recent emergences, creatures that evolved or manifested in response to human civilization rather than existing before it. In this interpretation, Magnemite didn't exist in ancient times because the magnetic fields and electrical systems that define its being didn't exist in ancient times. Only after humans built power plants and electrical infrastructure did an environmental niche open up for a Pokémon that could thrive in those conditions, and Magnemite evolved or emerged to fill that niche. It's evolution and fast forward, adaptation happening not over millions of years, but over decades or centuries in response to rapidly changing environments. This theory gains support from the Pokédex entries for certain species, which explicitly mention their association with human-created environments. Magnemite is said to appear in power plants and near electrical equipment. Clink is found primarily in industrial areas with machinery. Trubbish emerges from trash and pollution. These aren't Pokémon that happen to sometimes be near human things. They're Pokémon whose entire existence is defined by proximity to and interaction with human civilization. They're urban species, pollution species, industrial species, creatures that literally could not exist without the environmental changes humans have created. The implications of this rapid evolution or emergence are fascinating, suggesting that the Pokémon world's ecosystem is far more dynamic and responsive than typical evolutionary timescales would suggest. If new Pokémon can emerge within human timescales in response to new environmental conditions, then the Pokémon world is in constant flux, constantly generating new species to fill new niches, constantly adapting to changing circumstances. This would explain why each generation of games introduces new Pokémon, not just because Game Freak designs them, but because within the world's logic, new species are genuinely appearing, evolving, or manifesting in response to environmental changes, technological developments, and the expansion of human civilization. Some theorists propose that this rapid speciation might be connected to the unique properties of the Pokémon world itself, perhaps to the presence of so much energy from Pokémon moves and abilities saturating the environment. In a world where creatures can shoot fire and summon lightning, where ghost types can manipulate reality and psychic types can bend space, the ambient energy levels must be extraordinary. This constant exposure to various forms of power might accelerate natural processes, allowing evolution that would take millennia in our world to happen in decades in theirs. Inanimate objects exposed to these energies might spontaneously develop consciousness, explaining how a pile of trash could become trubbish or how industrial magnets could become magnemite. This energy-based explanation connects to the existence of fossil Pokémon, creatures that went extinct millions of years ago but can be revived through technology in the present day. If Pokémon energy can cause rapid evolution and even grant consciousness to inanimate matter, then it makes sense that it could also restore life to long-dead organic matter, reanimating fossils into living Pokémon. The revived fossil Pokémon aren't quite the same as their ancient ancestors. They've been filtered through human technology and contemporary energy patterns, emerging as rock types regardless of what their original typing might have been. This suggests that the revival process doesn't perfectly recreate what existed before, but creates something new influenced by present conditions. The theory about rapid evolution and energy-driven speciation also helps explain regional variants, Pokémon that look similar to established species but have adapted to different environments. Alolan forms and Galarian forms aren't just cosmetic variations, they're examples of accelerated evolution in action, species adapting to new environments quickly enough for humans to witness and document the change. A Vulpix population isolated in snowy mountains becomes an ice type in far fewer generations than typical evolution would require, driven by the intense environmental pressure and perhaps by the high ambient energy of the Pokémon world accelerating natural selection. There's something beautiful about imagining the Pokémon world as so alive, so dynamic, that new species can emerge within human memory, that evolution isn't just a historical process, but an ongoing contemporary phenomenon. It suggests a world where life is incredibly robust and creative, where consciousness and form are more fluid than in our reality, where the boundary between living and non-living is permeable enough that even garbage and magnets can cross it given the right conditions. It transforms the Pokémon world from a static setting into an ecosystem in constant creative flux, generating novelty and variety in response to every change, human-caused or natural, as these final theories settle like soft snow around us, as your eyes grow heavier and the boundary between waking and dreaming continues to blur. Remember that every question we've explored tonight points towards something larger, a world that's deeper and stranger than it first appears, that rewards attention and curiosity, that contains mysteries within mysteries waiting to be discovered. The theories are invitations to look closer, to think harder, to care enough about these creatures and their world, to wonder about the implications of small details, to construct elaborate explanations that tie together disparate elements into satisfying narratives. Whether you believe these theories or dismiss them, whether you find them enlightening or absurd, they represent something valuable, sustained engagement with a world that has captured imaginations across decades and generations. The Pokémon world persists not just because of official games and shows, but because of fans who keep thinking about it, questioning it, adding their own interpretations and ideas to the collective understanding. Every theory, even the wild ones, even the ones that turn out to be completely wrong, contributes to this ongoing conversation, keeps the world alive in the spaces between official content. So as you drift off tonight, carry these theories with you into sleep. Let them shape your dreams of Pokémon worlds, both familiar and strange. Dream of legendary birds granting eternal blessings, of clones working tirelessly in every Pokémon center, of possessed Pokéballs and invasive species and consciousness that persists beyond death. Dream of rapid evolution and energy-saturated ecosystems and mysteries that may never be fully solved. Dream of a world rich enough to contain all these possibilities simultaneously, deep enough to reward this kind of sustained attention and creative speculation. Yet there are still more theories to explore before sleep fully claims us, ideas that drift through the quiet corners of the Pokémon world, like mischievous through abandoned hallways, theories about time and memory and the nature of reality itself. One of the most philosophically complex theories in the entire fandom addresses the question of multiple timelines and whether the different Pokémon games and anime episodes all take place in the same universe, or whether they represent parallel realities that diverge at key moments. This theory emerged from noticing inconsistencies between different versions of the same events, characters who exist in one timeline but not another, outcomes that contradict each other depending on which game or series you're following. The introduction of Mega Evolution in Generation 6 provided the clearest canonical evidence for multiple timelines, with developers explicitly confirming that games featuring Mega Evolution exist in a different timeline from those without it. This official acknowledgement of branching realities opened up new possibilities for understanding the contradictions and inconsistencies that had accumulated across decades of games, anime episodes, manga chapters, and movies. Every choice a player makes, every version difference between red and blue, or sun and moon, could potentially represent a timeline split, a moment where reality branches into multiple parallel paths that each continue independently. In one timeline, Ash chooses Bulbasaur as his starter and begins a journey fundamentally different from the one we know, forming different relationships, encountering different Pokémon, perhaps never meeting Pikachu at all. In another timeline, Team Rocket succeeds in one of their countless schemes, capturing Pikachu and altering the course of history in ways that cascade through every subsequent event. In yet another timeline, the war that Lieutenant Surge mentions never happened, or happened differently, or is still ongoing, creating a world with completely different demographics and social structures. These parallel realities coexist, equally valid, equally real within their own contexts, never quite touching, but forever existing side by side. The theory proposes that legendary Pokémon, particularly those associated with time and space, like Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, might be aware of these multiple timelines in ways that ordinary beings aren't. Dialga controls time itself, able to move forward and backward through history, which would naturally give it awareness of different temporal paths and outcomes. Palkia controls space, able to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, which might extend to existing in multiple realities simultaneously. Giratina lives in the distortion world, a realm outside normal physics where conventional rules don't apply, which could be interpreted as a space between timelines, a place from which the legendary can observe all possible realities at once. This multi-timeline awareness might explain some of the more cryptic statements and behaviors exhibited by legendary Pokémon throughout the series. They're not just powerful creatures, but beings who perceive reality differently, who understand that every choice creates branches, that what seems like the only timeline to those living within it is actually just one of countless possibilities. When a legendary appears to a trainer, it might be selecting that specific timeline as important or worthy of attention, or it might be appearing simultaneously in multiple timelines, having the same encounter with different versions of the same trainer across parallel realities. Celebi adds another layer to this temporal complexity, able to travel through time and potentially between timelines as well. The Pokémon Forever movie shows Celebi bringing a young boy from the past into the present, demonstrating its power over temporal boundaries. But if Celebi can move through time, can it also move between timelines? Could it transport someone not just to a different when, but to a different what if, to a timeline where events unfolded differently. This would make Celebi not just a time traveler, but a reality traveler, a being that navigates the vast multiverse of Pokémon possibilities with ease. The implications of multiple timelines extend to questions about player choice and game design, raising the possibility that every decision you make as a player creates a new branch in reality. When you choose to catch a Pokémon or leave it in the wild, when you choose to battle a trainer or avoid them, when you choose one evolutionary path over another for a Pokémon that has multiple evolution options, you might be creating timeline splits, generating new realities that diverge from that moment forward. Every playthrough of every game would then be its own timeline, its own valid version of events, with your specific choices and experiences representing one path through an infinite forest of possibilities. This interpretation transforms the relationship between player and game into something more profound than simple entertainment. You're not just playing through a predetermined story, but actively participating in the creation of new realities, new timelines that exist somewhere in the vast multiverse of Pokémon possibilities. The Pokémon you catch, the team you build, the choices you make about how to interact with the world, all of these become acts of reality creation, moments where you're deciding which version of the Pokémon world will exist, which timeline will be followed, which possibilities will be realized, and which will remain forever potential. Some fans have extended this timeline theory to explain the presence of alternate universe characters like the Ultra Recon Squad from Pokémon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, humans from a dimension where light has been stolen and where evolution proceeded differently. These characters aren't just from a different place, but from a fundamentally different reality, one that shares some similarities with the main timeline, but has its own unique history and physical laws. Their arrival in the main timeline through ultra wormholes demonstrates that travel between realities is possible, at least for some beings under certain conditions, opening up possibilities for crossover events where characters or Pokémon from one timeline appear in another. The existence of these alternate dimensions and timelines raises questions about which reality, though, is the real one, or whether that question even makes sense in a multiverse context. Perhaps all timelines are equally real, equally valid, existing simultaneously without any one being more canonical than the others. Perhaps the Pokémon multiverse is infinite, containing every possible variation of every possible event, with new timelines constantly branching off from every choice, every random event, every moment where reality could have gone one way or another. In such an infinite multiverse, everything that could happen does happen somewhere, making every fan theory potentially true in some timeline, every imagined scenario a real event in some parallel reality. Before we move deeper into these reality-bending concepts, it's worth considering how the timeline theory connects to the nature of save files and game resets. When a player starts a new game, deleting their previous save file, what happens to the timeline they created during their first playthrough? Does it cease to exist, erased from reality along with the save data? Or does it continue independently, becoming a parallel timeline that persists even though the player has moved on to create a new one? This question sits at the intersection of game mechanics and metaphysics, asking whether the worlds we create through play have some kind of existence beyond the data stored on a cartridge or console. One interpretation suggests that every save file is a timeline, and starting a new game doesn't erase the previous timeline, but simply creates a new branch, a new reality that diverges from the moment the player first turned on the game. The original timeline continues in its own space, complete and self-contained, while the new timeline begins its own journey from the same starting point, but with different choices and outcomes. In this view, the multiverse of Pokémon timelines is constantly expanding as players around the world start new games, make different choices, explore different paths through the same basic structure of regions and gyms and legendary encounters. The theory gains a certain poetic resonance when you consider how many millions of players have engaged with Pokémon games over the decades, each one creating their own unique timeline through their choices and experiences. Every child who ever chose Squirtle over Charmander, every teenager who decided to use an unconventional team composition, every adult revisiting the games with new strategies and priorities, all of them are creating timelines adding to the vast multiverse of Pokémon realities. The collective experience of all these players would then be the true story of the Pokémon world, not any single canonical version, but the sum total of all possible versions existing simultaneously. There's a quiet comfort in this interpretation, suggesting that no playthrough is wasted, no abandoned save file truly lost. Every journey through the Pokémon world leaves a mark on the multiverse, creates a timeline that persists even if the player never returns to it. Your first clumsy attempt at becoming a Pokémon master as a child, the team you assembled without understanding competitive strategy, the legendary you accidentally defeated because you didn't know you were supposed to save first, all of these exist somewhere in the vast web of Pokémon timelines, preserved forever as part of the multiverse's infinite diversity. As we continue our gentle drift through these theoretical spaces, another cluster of ideas emerges around the nature of Pokémon intelligence and consciousness, particularly the question of whether Pokémon are truly equal to humans in cognitive ability, or whether the relationship between trainers and Pokémon is more complex and potentially more troubling than the series typically acknowledges. The games and anime generally present Pokémon as intelligent creatures capable of complex thought and emotion, able to make decisions, form relationships, and express preferences. But the fact that they willingly enter Pokeballs and follow commands from trainers raises questions about whether this submission is truly voluntary or whether something else is happening. One theory proposes that Pokeballs don't just contain Pokemon physically, but also influence their minds, creating a bond with the trainer that makes obedience feel natural and desirable rather than forced. This wouldn't be outright mind control in the sinister sense, but more like a subtle shift in perspective, the captured Pokemon suddenly finding themselves inclined to trust and follow their trainer, feeling a connection that didn't exist before the capture. This would explain why wild Pokemon can be aggressive and dangerous, but captured Pokemon are generally docile and cooperative. The ball itself creates a relationship that changes how the Pokemon perceives and relates to the trainer. Evidence for this mind-influencing effect can be found in how Pokemon behave immediately after capture. They don't struggle to escape or refuse to obey. They simply accept their new status as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Even Pokemon that were fighting fiercely just moments before being caught seem to immediately settle into their new role, suggesting that something changes at the moment of capture, beyond just physical containment. The friendship and affection systems in the games, where Pokemon gradually become more attached to their trainers through battle and care, might not be building a relationship from scratch, but rather deepening and strengthening the initial bond created by the Pokeball itself. This interpretation of Pokeball technology raises ethical questions that the series rarely addresses directly. If the balls do influence Pokemon minds, even benignly, then every capture is a kind of violation, a forced change in the Pokemon's mental state without their informed consent. The fact that this technology is given to 10-year-old children without any discussion of its implications suggests either that the people of the Pokemon world don't recognize or don't care about these ethical dimensions, or that they've normalized the practice to such a degree that it no longer registers as potentially problematic. Either possibility paints a more morally complex picture of Pokémon training than the games typically present. Team Plasma's stated goal in Generation 5 of liberating Pokémon from trainers takes on new significance in this context, moving from villainy to legitimate, ethical concern if Pokéballs truly do alter Pokémon consciousness. The fact that Team Plasma's leader N can communicate with Pokémon and claims they tell him they're unhappy being caught suggests that despite whatever bonding effect the balls create, some level of the Pokémon's original autonomy and preference persists, able to be detected by someone with the right abilities. This would make N not a misguided antagonist, but someone who's recognized a truth that most trainers either can't see or refuse to acknowledge, that the system they participate in involves a kind of benign subjugation dressed up as partnership. Of course, there's an alternative interpretation that's more optimistic, suggesting that Pokémon genuinely do want to be caught and trained, that the relationship with trainers offers them something valuable they can't get in the wild. Battle experience, opportunities for growth, travel to regions they'd never reach on their own, protection from predators, meals, medical care. These are all benefits that could make trainer life genuinely appealing to Pokémon. In this view, the Pokéball doesn't create artificial affection, but simply facilitates a relationship that both parties want, providing a way for Pokémon and humans to formalize their partnership in a manner that works within the constraints of their different forms and capabilities. This more positive interpretation is supported by instances where Pokémon leave trainers they're unhappy with, where they refuse to obey commands they disagree with, where they demonstrate clear agency and choice in how they interact with their trainers. Ash's Charizard famously refused to obey him for an extended period. Pikachu rejected its Pokéball entirely and chose to travel outside it. Numerous Pokémon throughout the series have shown that they can resist, leave, or modify relationships they're not satisfied with. These examples suggest that whatever bond the Pokéball creates, it's not absolute mind control, but something more nuanced, an influence that can be overcome if the Pokémon has strong enough reasons to resist. The question of Pokémon intelligence and autonomy connects to broader questions about what consciousness means in the Pokémon world, where the boundary between sentient and sapient lies, whether all Pokémon possess equal levels of awareness, or whether some are more intelligent than others. Psychic types clearly possess advanced cognitive abilities, able to communicate telepathically and solve complex problems. Ghost types demonstrate self-awareness and understanding of abstract concepts like death and identity. But what about simpler Pokémon like Caterpie or Magikarp? Do they possess the same level of consciousness as more advanced species? Or is there a hierarchy of awareness in the Pokémon world that parallels the hierarchy we see in real-world animals? Some Pokémon can speak human language directly, Meowth being the most famous example, having taught himself to talk in order to impress a female Meowth who preferred humans. The fact that a Pokémon can learn human language through study and practice suggests that the barrier between Pokémon and human communication isn't biological, but educational, that Pokémon have the cognitive capacity for complex language, but typically don't use it because they don't need to. This raises the unsettling possibility that every Pokémon could potentially speak if they chose to learn, that behind their cries and growls, there are complex thoughts being expressed in ways humans usually can't understand. The existence of Pokémon like Alakazam, whose Pokédex entries claim it has an IQ of 5,000 and can remember everything that has ever happened to it, suggests that some Pokémon might actually be more intelligent than humans, possessing cognitive abilities that far exceed human capacity. If this is true, the relationship between trainers and Pokémon becomes even more complex, with supposedly lesser beings commanding superior intelligences, children giving orders to entities that could think circles around them. The only way this makes sense is if the Pokémon choose to accept this arrangement, if they derive something valuable from it that makes the apparent inequality worthwhile. Perhaps what Pokémon gain from trainer relationships isn't just practical benefits like food and shelter, but something more fundamental about experience and growth. In the wild, most Pokémon would live relatively narrow lives, occupying the same territory, following the same patterns, never experiencing the diversity and challenge that comes with traveling through multiple regions and facing countless different opponents. With a trainer, even a young and inexperienced one, a Pokémon gets to see the world, test itself against varied challenges, evolve in ways that might not happen in wild circumstances. For an intelligent being, this expansion of experience and possibility might be worth the trade-off of following commands and living in a ball. As these questions about consciousness and autonomy drift through the quiet hours, they merge with theories about specific Pokémon species whose origins and purposes remain mysterious despite decades of games and lore. Unknown is perhaps the most enigmatic of these mysteries, Pokémon shaped like alphabet letters that appear in ancient ruins and seem to have connections to reality itself, able to manifest thoughts and desires into physical form when they gather in sufficient numbers. The unknown dimension accessed in Pokémon Crystal and later games shows these creatures existing in vast swarms, creating patterns and possibilities that seem to transcend normal Pokémon abilities. The theory about Unknown proposes that they're not really Pokémon in the traditional sense, but something more fundamental, perhaps fragments of the language that Arceus used to create the world, letters of power that remain from the original act of cosmic creation. In mythology, from the Sinnoh region, Arceus emerged from an egg in nothingness and created the universe through acts of will and thought. If those thoughts required some form of language to manifest, if creation required naming and describing, then perhaps Unknown are the remnants of that primordial language, still possessing traces of creative power that can alter reality when properly arranged. This would explain why Unknown appear in ancient ruins and places of historical significance. They're drawn to or naturally exist in locations where reality is thin, where the boundary between thought and manifestation is more permeable than usual. The ruins themselves might have been built by ancient civilizations who understood Unknown's power and tried to harness it, creating structures designed to channel and direct these living letters towards specific purposes. The fact that Unknown can manifest an entire Pokémon from a child's imagination in the third Pokémon movie demonstrates that their reality warping abilities are genuine, not just myths. They can literally bring thoughts into being when enough of them work together. Some variations of this theory suggest that Unknown might be watching or recording everything that happens in the Pokémon world, serving as a kind of cosmic archive that preserves all events and experiences. This would make sense if they're connected to the original creation. As witnesses to the beginning, they might naturally continue witnessing everything that follows, inscribing reality into themselves through their very existence. Every event, every choice, every moment in every timeline might be recorded somewhere in the patterns of Unknown, accessible to those who know how to read them, creating an ultimate library of all possible events across all possible realities. The connection between Unknown and written language in our world creates an interesting meta layer to this theory, as if the Pokémon are acknowledging their own nature as characters in games and stories, beings made of language and text given form within the fiction. When players encounter Unknown and arrange them to spell words or messages, they're engaging with the fundamental building blocks of the Pokémon world, the letters and symbols that constitute its reality. This self-referential quality makes Unknown unique among Pokémon, creatures whose very existence points toward the constructed nature of their universe. Moving from cosmic mysteries to more grounded but equally intriguing questions, there's a cluster of theories about the true nature of certain Pokémon evolution methods and what they might reveal about the underlying mechanisms of evolution in this world. Evolution in Pokémon doesn't work like evolution in our reality. It's not a gradual process across generations, but a sudden transformation that individual creatures undergo, more like metamorphosis than Darwinian evolution. Yet the triggers for these transformations vary wildly. Some Pokémon evolve through battle experience, others through exposure to special stones, some only when traded to another trainer, and some only under highly specific conditions involving time of day, location, or emotion. The theory about trait evolution proposes that these Pokémon require exposure to the energy signature of a different trainer in order to trigger their transformation, suggesting that part of what drives evolution is the relationship between Pokémon and humans. When a Pokémon is traded, it doesn't just change physical location, it changes its entire relational context, bonding with a new trainer whose energy and personality are different from the original. This shock of new connection, the sudden shift in the Pokémon's primary relationship, might provide the catalyst needed for evolution to occur. It would mean that some Pokémon literally need human relationships to evolve, that their growth is fundamentally tied to their interactions with trainers rather than being purely internal processes. This dependency on human interaction for evolution creates an interesting dynamic where certain Pokémon are almost designed for domestication, unable to reach their full potential without human involvement. Machoke can never become Machamp in the wild, Kadabra can never become Alakazam, Haunter can never become Gengar, all of them stuck at middle stages unless a human catches them and trades them to another human. From an evolutionary perspective, this seems maladaptive, creating a ceiling on wild Pokémon development that only human intervention can break. Unless the relationship with humans is itself part of the evolutionary strategy, these species developing specifically to benefit from human partnership in ways that make them more successful than they would be alone. Stone evolution presents a different puzzle. These Pokémon require exposure to concentrated elemental energy in the form of evolution stones to trigger their transformations. Fire stones, water stones, thunder stones, and others all contain essences of their respective types in crystallized form, concentrated doses of power that normal environmental exposure would never provide. The question becomes, where do these stones come from, and why do some Pokémon need them to evolve while others don't? One theory proposes that stones are fossilized or crystallized in energy from legendary Pokémon, fragments of power left behind by ancient encounters or battles, now scattered throughout the world where they can be found and used. This would make every use of an evolution stone a kind of communion with legendary power, exposing the Pokémon to energy that traces back to the cosmic beings who shaped the world. A firestone might contain fragments of Moltres' flame or traces of Groudon's primal heat, passed down through geological processes until it crystallized into a form humans could discover and use. When a Vulpix is exposed to this stone and evolves into Ninetales, it's not just maturing, but absorbing and integrating power that has legendary origins, fundamentally altering its nature through contact with something beyond normal Pokémon energy. The friendship-based evolutions present yet another mystery. Pokémon that require high happiness or affection with their trainer to evolve, as if positive emotions themselves are a catalyst for transformation. Eevee's evolutions into Espeon and Umbreon work this way, requiring strong bonds with the trainer plus specific times of day to trigger the change. This suggests that emotions in the Pokémon world aren't just subjective feelings, but actual energies that can produce physical effects, that love and trust between a Pokémon and trainer generate measurable forces capable of rewriting biology and triggering evolution. If emotions are energies in this literal sense, it opens up entirely new ways of understanding how the Pokémon world works, suggesting that consciousness and feeling are woven into the fabric of reality in ways they aren't in our universe. The power of friendship, typically presented in the series as a thematic element or moral lesson, might be literally true, an actual force that can accomplish things impossible through strength or strategy alone. Every time Ash wins a battle through the power of his bond with Pikachu, every time a Pokémon overcomes impossible odds because it doesn't want to let its trainer down, these might not be narrative conveniences, but demonstrations of how emotional energy functions in this reality. The existence of Pokémon, like Sylveon, which evolves from Eevee specifically through affection, combined with knowing a fairy-type move, adds even more complexity to evolution mechanics, combining emotional bonds with learned abilities in ways that suggest evolution responds to multiple simultaneous factors. It's as if Sylveon requires both the energy of affection and the understanding of fairy-type moves to manifest, needing both love and knowledge, working together to trigger the transformation. This makes evolution less like a simple biological process and more like a kind of alchemy, combining different elements in precise proportions to produce transformations that transcend normal physical laws. Location-based evolutions, where Pokémon must be in specific places to evolve, suggest that geography itself holds power in the Pokémon world, that certain locations are saturated with energies or possess properties that can trigger transformations. Magnezone can only evolve from Magneton in areas with special magnetic fields. Leafeon requires the presence of a moss rock. Glaceon needs an ice rock. These environmental triggers imply that the world is full of power spots and energy concentrations that affect Pokémon development in fundamental ways. Ancient civilizations in the Pokémon world might have built their sacred sites and important structures at these natural power locations, recognizing them as places where the boundary between normal reality and something greater becomes thin enough for transformation to occur. Slowly, the story widens to encompass the deepest mystery of all, the question of what Arceus truly is, and whether the creature presented in games as the creator deity is really the ultimate source of everything, or whether there might be something even beyond it. Arceus is described as emerging from an egg before the universe existed, which immediately raises the question of where the egg came from, what existed before Arceus to create the conditions for its egg to form and hatch. The mythology never addresses this, treating Arceus's egg as the starting point beyond which no further questions are asked, but theorists have noticed this logical gap and constructed elaborate proposals to fill it. One theory suggests that Arceus isn't actually the creator of everything, but rather the first being to emerge in this particular cycle of reality, implying that the Pokémon universe might be cyclical, going through repeated births and deaths, with Arceus as the entity that remembers and perpetuates the pattern. In this interpretation, there might be something beyond Arceus, some truly ultimate source that generates the conditions for Arceus eggs to form in the void, then allows those Arceus to create their universes, which eventually collapse back into nothingness before the cycle begins again. Arceus would then be something like a cosmic gardener, tasked with growing a universe that will eventually die and be reborn over and over eternally. This cyclical interpretation connects to various cosmological models from real-world philosophy and religion. Ideas about eternal return and the wheel of time that appear in numerous cultural traditions. If the Pokemon universe follows this pattern, then everything that happens has happened before in previous cycles and will happen again in future ones, an infinite repetition where the same events play out across eternity with only slight variations. Every journey through the Pokemon world would then be both unique and predetermined, specific to this cycle, but echoing countless previous versions where similar trainers caught similar Pokemon and faced similar challenges. Alternative theories propose that Arceus might be one of many creator deities, each responsible for their own universe in a vast multiverse of Pokemon realities. This would align with the timeline theory discussed earlier, suggesting that every timeline has its own Arceus or shares access to a single Arceus who exists across all timelines simultaneously. If there are infinite timelines, there might need to be infinite Arceus to manage them all, unless Arceus exists outside time in a way that allows it to be present in every timeline without needing to duplicate itself. The cosmology becomes almost incomprehensibly complex at this level, layers of reality and deity stacked upon each other in ways that challenge normal understanding. Some fans have proposed even more radical theories, suggesting that Arceus might not be a deity at all, but rather an extremely powerful Pokemon that ancient people mistook for a god, a creature whose abilities are so far beyond normal Pokemon that it seemed divine to early observers. In this interpretation, the creation mythology isn't literal truth, but ancient people's attempt to understand and explain a being whose power exceeded their comprehension, attributing cosmic significance to a creature that, while incredibly powerful, didn't actually create the universe. This would make Arceus more like a legendary Pokemon than a true god, exceptional and worthy of reverence, but not actually omnipotent or omniscient. This demystifying interpretation has appeal for those who prefer to keep the Pokemon world grounded in some kind of internal logic, rather than invoking true divine power, but it struggles to account for some of Arceus's demonstrated abilities, particularly its capacity to create entirely new dimensions and its role in the creation trio of Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. If Arceus created the Pokemon that control time, space, and antimatter, it's hard to argue that it's not genuinely cosmic in power and significance. Unless those creation stories are also mythologized accounts of something more mundane, Arceus using its abilities to influence these powerful Pokemon rather than literally creating them from nothing. The relationship between Arceus and other legendary Pokemon presents its own set of theoretical puzzles, particularly the question of whether legendaries reproduce and how new legendary Pokemon come into existence. Some legendaries appear to be unique, singular beings with no others of their kind anywhere in any timeline. Others seem to be species, rare but not literally unique, with multiple individuals possible. The games muddy these waters by allowing players to catch legendaries and even, in some cases, breed them, suggesting that at least some legendaries aren't as singular as their lore claims. How do we reconcile the mythology that presents certain Pokemon as unique cosmic forces with game mechanics that allow multiple players to each catch their own version? One elegant solution proposes that legendary Pokemon exist simultaneously across all timelines as single entities. When a player catches a legendary in their game, they're not removing it from existence, but creating a connection to that singular being that allows them to summon it as needed. This would explain how multiple trainers can each have a Dialga or Palkia without contradicting the lore that says these are unique entities. Each trainer is connecting to the same Dialga across different timelines or different moments in that Pokemon's existence outside normal time. The legendary isn't truly captured in the traditional sense, but has chosen to make itself accessible to the trainer in response to them proving themselves worthy. This interpretation preserves the mythological significance of legendaries while accommodating game mechanics, suggesting that the relationship between trainers and legendary Pokémon is fundamentally different from relationships with regular Pokémon. When you use a legendary in battle, you're not commanding a pet, but channeling the power of a cosmic force that has agreed to assist you, more like prayer or invocation than traditional training. This would make legendary Pokémon closer to deities or spirits in their nature, beings who cannot truly be owned or controlled, but who might choose to lend their power to those they deem worthy. Before we drift into the final mysteries of the night, there's one more cluster of theories to explore, ideas about the future of the Pokémon world and what might be coming in the ongoing evolution of the series. Some fans have noticed patterns in how new generations are introduced, cycles of innovation and consolidation, expansions of core mechanics, followed by refinements of existing systems. These patterns, if they continue, might hint at future directions for the franchise, new types being introduced, new mechanics that fundamentally alter how we understand Pokémon, new regions that challenge or expand the established cosmology. The introduction of Fairy type in Generation 6 broke a pattern that had held since Generation 2, demonstrating that the type system isn't fixed and immutable, but can be expanded when the designers find compelling reasons to do so. This raises the question of whether additional types might be added in future generations. What other elemental or conceptual categories might deserve their own type classification? Sound type has been proposed by fans for years, noting that many moves already use sound-based mechanics without having a dedicated type. Light type is another frequent suggestion, offered as a counterpoint to dark type's existence. Cosmic type has been proposed for Pokémon associated with space and stars, currently scattered across various existing types without a true home. The theory about future types extends to speculation about how new types might retroactively affect existing Pokémon, whether current species would be reclassified to fit new categories, or whether the new types would apply only to newly introduced Pokémon. When Fairy type was added, many existing Pokémon were retroactively changed to include it in their typing. Clefairy became Pure Fairy instead of Normal. Jigglypuff gained Fairy alongside Normal, creating ripple effects throughout the entire competitive scene and forcing players to reconsider strategies and team compositions they'd used for years. Any future type additions would likely create similar disruptions, transforming the metagame and forcing everyone to relearn aspects of the battle system they thought they'd mastered. Some theories look beyond type additions to more fundamental changes in how Pokémon work, suggesting that future generations might introduce new forms of transformation beyond evolution and mega evolution. Armored Pokémon, fusion between species, temporary power-ups tied to environmental conditions. All of these have been proposed as possible future mechanics. The introduction of regional variants and Gigantamax forms shows that the developers are willing to create new ways for Pokémon to change and transform, suggesting that the concept of Pokémon as fixed entities might continue to evolve toward more fluid and context-dependent forms. The most radical theories propose that future generations might break from the formula entirely, introducing new regions that don't follow the standard 8 gyms and Elite Four structure, or even creating games where the player character isn't a trainer at all, but takes on some other role in Pokémon society. Imagine a game where you play as a Pokémon Ranger, focused on conservation and protection rather than battling. Or a game set in the ancient past, before Pokéballs and modern training methods, where relationships with Pokémon developed through entirely different means. or even a game from a Pokemon's perspective, experiencing the world through their eyes and understanding what it means to be caught and trained from the other side of that relationship. These speculative futures might never materialize in official games, but they demonstrate the creative engagement that fans bring to the Pokémon world, their willingness to imagine new possibilities and new ways of interacting with these creatures and regions. Every theory, whether about past mysteries or future directions, represents investment in the world, a desire to see it continue, expand, and deepen in ways that reward sustained attention and care. The fact that fans theorize so extensively about Pokémon, constructing elaborate explanations and imagining detailed futures, shows that the franchise has achieved something remarkable. It's created a world that feels real, enough to warrant this level of engagement. As these final theories drift away like Drifloon on evening winds, as consciousness begins its slow fade towards sleep, what remains is a sense of wonder at how much depth exists in this world of Pokémon, how many questions lurk beneath the cheerful surface, how many mysteries persist even after decades of games and stories and explanations. The theories we've explored tonight, from the cosmic to the intimate, from timeline splits to evolution mechanics, all point toward the same fundamental truth. The Pokémon world is richer than it needs to be, more carefully constructed than purely commercial concerns would require, deep enough to support this kind of sustained theoretical investigation. Whether these theories are true in any official sense matters less than what they reveal about the engagement between fans and the world they love, the attention they bring to details others might overlook, the creativity they apply to making sense of contradictions and mysteries. Every theory is an act of love, disguised as analysis, a way of saying that this world matters enough to think about carefully, to question, to attempt to understand more fully. The theories keep the Pokémon world alive in the spaces between games, ensuring that there's always something new to consider, always another angle from which to view familiar elements. Yet before we finally surrender to sleep, there remain a few more whispers of theory to explore, gentle ideas about the legendary bird trio and what their presence in the Kanto region might signify about the deeper structure of the Pokémon world. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres appear throughout the first generation as mysterious, powerful birds associated with ice, electricity, and fire respectively, each one dwelling in a remote location where few trainers ever venture. Their separation across the region, Articuno in the Seafoam Islands, Zapdos in the abandoned power plant, Moltres on Victory Road, seems almost deliberate, as if they're positioned to maintain some kind of balance or fulfill specific roles in the regional ecosystem. The theory about the legendary birds proposes that they're not just powerful Pokémon, but actual guardians or regulators of Kanto's climate and environment, each one controlling or influencing weather patterns and natural forces in their respective territories. Articuno brings cold air and winter storms, keeping the Seafoam Islands perpetually frozen and affecting temperature patterns throughout the eastern coast. Zapdos generates electrical storms and lightning, drawn to the power plant by the electromagnetic fields, but also contributing to the region's thunderstorm activity. Moltres emanates heat and volcanic energy, its presence on Victory Road serving to moderate the temperature on that mountain, and perhaps influencing lava flows and seismic activity throughout Kanto. This interpretation of the legendary birds as environmental regulators would mean that their presence isn't random, but essential to the region's stability. Removing any of them or disrupting their patterns could have catastrophic effects on Kanto's climate and ecology. The fact that players can catch these birds in the games might represent a genuine threat to the region, pulling these essential forces out of their natural positions and disrupting the balance they maintain. Perhaps this is why the games don't show any consequences of catching legendaries. It would break the fantasy if capturing Articuno immediately caused Kanto to experience catastrophic warming, or if catching Moltres plunged the region into an ice age. Some variations of this theory extend beyond Kanto to propose that every region has its own set of guardian legendaries, fulfilling similar roles, maintaining environmental balance, and preventing natural disasters. The weather trio of Hoenn, Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza explicitly demonstrates this principle, with two legendaries, representing land and sea locked in eternal conflict, while a third mediates between them from the sky. The Lake Guardians of Sinnoh might serve similar purposes, maintaining psychic balance and protecting the minds of living beings in their region. Every legendary might have a job, a purpose beyond simply being rare and powerful, a role in maintaining the structure and stability of the world. This systematic approach to legendary Pokémon suggests a designed world rather than one that evolved randomly, as if some intelligence, perhaps Arceus, or perhaps something even greater, deliberately placed these guardians in specific locations to fulfill specific purposes. The world of Pokémon would then be more like a garden that requires constant tending than a wild ecosystem that self-regulates, with legendary Pokémon serving as the gardeners, each one maintaining their assigned portion of reality. This would explain why legendary Pokémon are so often associated with specific locations, and why disturbing them is treated as potentially catastrophic in the lore, even if the games don't mechanically enforce consequences. The ancient civilizations that appear throughout Pokémon regions, from the ruins in Kanto to the elaborate temple complexes of Sinnoh and beyond, all seem to have understood legendary Pokémon in ways that modern society has forgotten. These ancient peoples built structures clearly designed to honor, summon, or contain legendary beings, suggesting they had knowledge about how legendaries work and what they require that has since been lost to time. The Brass Tower and Tin Tower in Johto were built specifically for Ho-Oh and Lugia, creating sacred spaces where these birds could dwell and be revered. The Spear Pillar in Sinnoh was designed to summon Dialga and Palkia, suggesting the ancient Celestica people knew exactly how to call forth these cosmic forces. The theory about ancient knowledge proposes that there was once a time when humans and legendary Pokémon had closer, more direct relationships, when the boundaries between mortal and divine were more permeable, and humans could regularly interact with cosmic forces in ways that now seem impossible. These ancient civilizations might have been guided by legendary Pokémon, receiving instruction and wisdom directly from beings who understood the structure of reality itself. The temples and ruins they left behind would then be more than just religious structures. They'd be functional devices designed according to specifications provided by legendaries, built to accomplish purposes that modern humans can no longer fully understand. This lost knowledge might explain why so many ancient ruins contain puzzles and trials that trainers must complete before accessing legendary Pokémon. These challenges aren't arbitrary obstacles, but actual requirements, tests designed to ensure that only those with specific qualities or abilities can reach the legendaries within. The trials might serve to protect both the legendary and the world from unprepared humans who might misuse or fail to properly interact with cosmic forces. Every gym badge requirement, every strength puzzle, every pattern that must be deciphered, all of these could be remnants of ancient wisdom about who should and shouldn't have access to beings of such tremendous power. The decline of this ancient knowledge, the transition from a world where humans regularly interacted with legendaries to one where such encounters are rare and shocking, might be connected to the war that Lieutenant Surge mentions, or to some other catastrophic event that disrupted the relationship between humans and legendary Pokémon. Perhaps the ancient civilizations grew too confident, attempted to control or command legendaries in ways that crossed boundaries, and were destroyed or diminished as a consequence. The ruins scattered across every region would then be warnings as well as treasures, reminders of what happens when humans forget their place in the cosmic order and try to dominate forces they should instead respect and serve. Some theories propose that this ancient knowledge isn't entirely lost, but preserved in fragmented form by certain families or organizations, groups like the Draconid people in Hoenn, who maintain oral traditions about Rayquaza, or the various temple guardians and shrine keepers who appear throughout the games. These knowledge keepers might possess information about legendary Pokémon that they carefully guard, only sharing it with trainers who prove themselves worthy through their actions and character. The fact that these guardians often test players before allowing them to proceed suggests they're evaluating more than just battle prowess. They're looking for specific qualities that indicate the trainer can be trusted with the knowledge and power they're seeking. The connection between ancient civilizations and unknown takes on new significance in this context, as unknown appear almost exclusively in ancient ruins and seem to be connected to structures built long ago by people whose full capabilities and understanding we've lost. If unknown are fragments of creation language, as discussed earlier, then the ancient peoples might have known how to read and use them, how to arrange these living letters into patterns that could accomplish specific purposes. The ruins where unknown dwell might be ancient archives or libraries, places where knowledge was stored not in written form, but in the patterns of unknown themselves, creating a living record that could theoretically be accessed by those who understand the language. This idea of knowledge stored in unknown patterns suggests that everything the ancient civilizations knew about legendary Pokémon, about the structure of reality, about the relationship between humans and cosmic forces, might still exist encoded in these ruins, waiting for someone with the right abilities to read and interpret it. Every puzzle involving unknown might be less like a random challenge and more like a genuine linguistic or conceptual problem, a question posed in the language of creation that requires understanding fundamental truths to answer correctly. The fact that players can solve these puzzles through trial and error rather than true comprehension might mean we're accidentally stumbling on answers to questions we don't fully understand. As we drift through these final considerations about ancient knowledge and forgotten wisdom, it's worth noting how this theme of lost understanding appears throughout the Pokémon series, in the fossil Pokémon that can be revived but never quite match what they were in their original era, in the ancient texts that can no longer be fully translated, in the ruins that clearly had purposes we can only guess at. The Pokémon world is full of echoes of the past, suggestions that previous civilizations achieved things current that society cannot match, understood truths that have since been forgotten. This creates a melancholy atmosphere, a sense that despite all the progress and technology of the modern Pokémon world, something important has been lost along the way. The theory extends to propose that the entire structure of Pokémon training, the gym challenge and league system, might be a degraded remnant of ancient practices that once had deeper spiritual or cosmic significance. Perhaps what we now see as a competitive sport or coming-of-age journey was originally a sacred path, a way for humans to align themselves with cosmic forces and prove their worthiness to interact with legendary Pokémon. The 8 badges might correspond to 8 cosmic principles or elements. Gathering them might have been a ritual process of attuning oneself to different aspects of reality, and the Elite Four might have been guardians of final mysteries that only the fully initiated could safely approach. If this is true, then modern Pokémon training is both a preservation and a corruption of ancient wisdom, maintaining the structure and outward forms while losing the deeper meaning and purpose. Trainers go through the motions, collecting badges and challenging gyms, without understanding that they're participating in a ritual framework designed for purposes far beyond simple competition. The fact that this degraded system still works, that trainers who complete the gym challenge do seem to be capable of handling legendary encounters better than those who don't, suggests that something of the original wisdom persists even in corrupted form, that the structure itself contains power even when its users don't fully comprehend its significance. This theme of forgotten knowledge connects to the broader question of whether the Pokémon world is in a state of decline or advancement, whether modern society represents progress beyond ancient limitations or degradation from ancient heights. The technological achievements of the current era, Pokeballs, PC storage, systems, healing machines, all suggest advancement and sophistication beyond what ancient peoples could achieve. Yet the ancient structures and ruins demonstrate capabilities that modern society can't match. Buildings that have stood for thousands of years without maintenance, energy systems that still function despite being abandoned, knowledge about legendary Pokémon that current experts lack. Perhaps the answer is that different eras excel in different areas. Ancient peoples understood the spiritual and cosmic dimensions of reality better, while modern society has developed superior technology and practical applications. The fossil Pokémon offer an interesting lens through which to examine this question of ancient versus modern capabilities, as they represent creatures that thrived in prehistoric times but went extinct long before human civilization developed. The ability to revive these extinct species through modern technology suggests significant advancement. Humans can now restore life to beings that nature itself allowed to die out. Yet the revived fossils are described as imperfect recreations, not quite matching what the original creatures were, possibly because the revival process is flawed or because the modern environment can't support them in their original form. This creates an ambiguous situation where modern technologies can accomplish the impossible, but not perfectly, can bring back the dead, but not quite as they were. Some theories propose that the prehistoric Pokémon might not have gone extinct naturally, but were deliberately removed from the ecosystem by legendary Pokémon or ancient humans who deemed them too dangerous or disruptive to coexist with other life. The fact that many fossil Pokémon are described as fierce predators, creatures like Tyrantrum and Aerodactyl that would have been apex predators in their era, supports this idea. Perhaps at some point in ancient history, a decision was made to end the age of these dominant predators to make room for a more diverse and balanced ecosystem, and the extinctions we attribute to natural disasters or climate change were actually deliberate interventions by beings with the power to reshape the world. This would cast fossil revival in a more troubling light, as humans using modern technology to undo decisions that were made for good reasons by those who understood the full context and consequences. Every revived Tyrantrum or Rampardos might represent a small tear in the carefully maintained fabric of the ecosystem, reintroducing elements that were removed on purpose rather than lost by accident. The fact that revived fossils are always rock type, regardless of what their original typing might have been, could be a safety measure built into the revival process, ensuring that these potentially dangerous creatures are nerfed, made less threatening than they would be in their original form, preventing them from reclaiming their ancient dominance. Before we finally release our grip on waking consciousness, there's one last cluster of theories to consider, ideas about the nature of Pokémon moves and abilities, what it means that creatures can learn to manipulate reality in specific ways through training, and practice. The existence of moves that can alter weather, manipulate time, create dimensional rifts, and affect probability suggests that Pokémon have access to forces and abilities that go far beyond mere physical strength or elemental power. When a Pokémon uses Trick Room to reverse speed priority, or gravity to alter how moves interact with targets, they're not just using special abilities, but actually rewriting the rules of local reality to suit their needs. This reality warping capacity raises profound questions about what Pokémon fundamentally are, whether they're biological creatures that happen to have special powers, or whether they're something more fundamental, manifestations of natural forces that take physical form but remain connected to the cosmic principles they embody. A Pokémon that uses the earthquake might not be creating vibrations through physical force, but tapping into the fundamental concept of earth and instability, channeling that principle through their body to affect the battlefield. A Pokémon using thunder might not be generating electricity, but becoming a conduit for the cosmic force of lightning, briefly aligning themselves with that principle so completely that they can direct its manifestation. This interpretation would make every Pokémon a kind of bridge between physical reality and conceptual forces, creatures that exist simultaneously in the material world and in the realm of pure principle or ideal. Their types would represent their primary alignment with specific cosmic forces, fire types being fundamentally connected to the principle of combustion and heat, psychic types aligned with consciousness and thought, ghost types bridging the gap between life and death. Learning new moves would then be less about acquiring new techniques and more about expanding their range of cosmic alignment, learning to channel different principles through their being even if those principles aren't their primary nature. The TMs and HMs that allow Pokémon to instantly learn moves that would normally require training or breeding support, this cosmic channeling interpretation, these devices might not be teaching in the traditional sense, but opening neural or spiritual pathways that allow the Pokémon to access principles they couldn't reach before. When you use a TM to teach Thunderbolt to a Pokémon that wouldn't naturally learn it, you're not programming them like a computer, but creating a connection between that Pokémon and the cosmic principle of electricity, giving them a channel they can use to manifest lightning, even though it's not part of their natural affinity. The fact that TMs are consumed in most generations, becoming unusable after a single application, suggests they're exhausted by the process of creating these connections, their energy depleted in forging new pathways between physical beings and cosmic principles. The move tutors who appear in various games take on new significance in this framework as individuals who possess the knowledge and ability to create these cosmic connections without needing devices like TMs. They might be the last remnants of ancient traditions, knowledge keepers who understand how to align Pokémon with specific principles through ritual or teaching methods that have been preserved over generations. The fact that move tutors often require payment or rare items for their services suggests they're offering something valuable that goes beyond mere instruction. They're facilitating transformations in the Pokémon's fundamental nature, expansions of their capacity to channel cosmic forces. As these final theoretical frameworks drift away into the approaching silence of sleep, as consciousness begins its final dissolution into dreams and rest, what remains is a profound appreciation for how much thought and care has gone into constructing the Pokémon world across decades of games, shows, movies, and supplemental material. Every detail, from the specific types certain Pokémon possess, to the locations where legendaries dwell, to the methods by which evolution occurs, all of these elements fit together into a coherent whole that's rich enough to support endless interpretation and deep enough to reward sustained attention. The theories we've explored tonight represent just a fraction of the ideas that fans have developed over the years, just a sampling of the questions that can be asked when you take this world seriously and examine it with care and curiosity. For every theory discussed here, there are dozens more circulating in online communities, appearing in videos and forums and long text posts where fans share their observations and interpretations. The collective effort to understand the Pokémon world, to make sense of its mysteries and contradictions, to construct elaborate explanations that tie together disparate elements, represents one of the most remarkable aspects of the franchise's enduring success. These theories matter not because they're necessarily correct, but because they demonstrate engagement. They show that people care enough about this world to think deeply about it, to question its logic, to imagine its hidden depths. Every theory is an invitation to see the Pokémon world from a new angle, to reconsider familiar elements in unfamiliar ways, to discover complexity and meaning in places you might have overlooked. Whether you accept these theories or reject them, whether they change how you experience Pokémon, or simply provide interesting ideas to consider, they enrich the overall experience of engaging with this world, adding layers of possible meaning that make every playthrough, every episode, every encounter with these creatures potentially more significant than it might first appear. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed drifting through these quiet theories, there's another video waiting on the left of your screen. Feel free to let it play in the background. You may learn something new as you drift off.